approach the far northwest of Scotland. Under the cloud cover, temperatures not falling much lower than around 8 to 10 degrees, but where we do see some clear skies, bit of a chilly start on Wednesday, but here we will see some sunshine. Elsewhere, a bit of a dull start, but the mist and low cloud will begin to burn away. So come the afternoon, I'm fairly optimistic. A lot of us seeing some sunny spells. The exceptions really across the very far northwest of Scotland, maybe the far northwest of Northern Ireland too. Here we see some cloud and some rain, but in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs potentially reaching 20 or 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning.
Very good morning, the Lib Dems.
First time since the local election results. And the Lib Dems are going to try and bring down the government. They think they can trigger a motion of no confidence? It's going nowhere.
Probably going nowhere. And also, we're going to be talking to Hannah Bourne-Taylor. She's the woman who goes naked and then paints her body like a Swift. The Swifts are coming home in the next couple of days, and the government don't support giving them anywhere to live.
But she's going to be wearing clothes when we speak to her, mercifully.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In West Yorkshire, the A639 is closed off junction 7 of the M621 at Belle Isle because of a fire at a derelict pub. In Lincolnshire, the A15 is closed southbound out of Barton upon Humber after an accident overnight. On the M16 Greater Manchester, there's lane closed anti-clockwise after an accident between junctions 17 and 16 from Prestwich to Pendlebury. It's taking nearly half an hour in queues from junction 19 at Hayward. On the M1 in Leicestershire, there's lane closed each way for emergency repairs between junctions 24 and 25 between Kegworth and the A52, taking half an hour in queues from junction 26. In Worcestershire, the A46 is closed each way between Evesham and Tewkesbury after an accident. There's widespread disruption to train services across the southeast of England because of industrial action. And on the M25 in Surrey, there's a lane closed clockwise where someone's broken down just after the Cobham services. The queues back beyond junction 9 at Leatherhead. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Organisations, plural, because there's loads of people doing this. The organisations are charging schools to be part of this odd league table about who's trying to outdo who when it comes to who is more trans inclusive with the kids than the next person. There's something makes me uneasy about this.
Supposing a child comes home and says, you think, oh, I've done well today. He said, well, have you done? He said, well, I was #1 painter, or I was #1 reader. No, I wasn't. I was made LGBT champion. This is a 4- and 5-year-old. Look, I can understand this, actually, as we develop into the secondary school. I can understand more debates taking place. I cannot understand why we have to thrust it at young children. And I think if you ask the parents, they'd be hostile to it. And what about the role the teacher has to play in all this?
Society has been one way, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and they're pushing it very far in order to kind of proliferate change. Mm-hmm. And this is probably the toughest period in that evolutionary process, because the LGBTQ plus community is saying that you've got to really rage against the machine to get people to listen. Because put it like this now, even this conversation, the whole country is listening, the whole world is listening. These are the kinds of eyeballs and ears they haven't had before. And there's going to be friction. There's going to be a locking of heads in the process to getting to a point where you establish a new equilibrium where they feel more incorporated. Like I've said, the greatest force of allies that the LGBTQ plus community has always had is heterosexual women. What you're moving towards now is doing things that is beginning to turn them from allies into people who feel that, oh, for you to thrive, I'm being deprived, and that's a problem. When they realize you're alienating allies, they will understand you've got to recalibrate to have that kind of understanding between both parties.
9:30 on Tuesday, 7th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Very good morning. Thank you for joining us. So, defence under attack. China is suspected of hacking the Ministry of Defence, targeting military personnel. Do MPs need to get tougher on China? The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, spoke to GB News earlier.
This is a third-party data set that appears to have been compromised. That has been shut down immediately by the Ministry of...
And a cybercrime warning. Facebook and Instagram are now the source of 1 in 50 crimes. We're going to tell you how to try to avoid being a victim.
And the 68th edition of the Eurovision Song Contest kicks off in Malmo today, but the UK entry, Ollie Alexander, says that the Union Jack flag can be divisive and nationalistic.
I thought flags were meant to be nationalistic. Israel has rejected that ceasefire offer from Hamas, and it's continuing its invasion of the southern Gazan city of Rafah. We'll have the latest.
And the Green Party are now investigating that councillor who declared his election victory a win for the people of Gaza. Should Mohsin Ali be booted out of politics for saying this?
Raise the voice of Palestine! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
His comments that are especially provocative and under investigation were about a rabbi who's now had to go into hiding with his family. And the Green Party, I'm afraid, knew about these comments before the local elections, so they should be investigating their own failure to respond.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts this morning, gbnews.com/yoursay. First, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Talks will resume in Cairo today after Israel rejected a ceasefire proposal that was accepted by the Hamas terror group. Israel's Prime Minister says the terms of agreement are far from meeting its core demands. But Benjamin Netanyahu said he would send a delegation to Egypt today to continue the ceasefire talks. It comes after a night of airstrikes with the Israeli military now in control of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, told GB News that blocking the flow of aid would have a devastating consequence.
The idea that Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I specifically named him because I don't believe many people in Israel are supportive of this, now wants to close down the Rafah crossing along with the Erez crossing in the north and then Karim Shalom as well. It means that more and more people will face famine. The humanitarian aid is not getting in. So this is compounding the matters. Charging into Rafah with those tanks is as bad as charging into Gaza in the first place. There's an absence of strategy as to where Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to go with this. And we saw things escalate very quickly with Iran, and that could easily happen again.
China is suspected of carrying out a massive hacking attack on Britain's Ministry of Defence. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is due to update MPs on the cyberattack, in which a database containing details of armed force personnel was targeted. It means bank details and some addresses of serving personnel and veterans may have been compromised. The Russian president is to be inaugurated today, though the US and almost all EU nations will avoid the ceremony. Vladimir Putin will be sworn in for another 6-year term at the Kremlin later, after elections that were widely seen as neither free nor fair. It comes a day after Russia said it would hold nuclear weapons drills, which the US described as irresponsible rhetoric. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Very good morning. It's 9:34. Feels like a Monday. It's actually a Tuesday. Well, some of us did come to work yesterday. Some of us had a nice weekend off.
I did. Very nice too. I enjoyed the rain in particular.
It's Britain's Newsroom.
Torrential.
On GB News, we hope you had a lovely bank holiday. We've got a lot to get through this morning. First time we've been on air since all those elections. What did you make of Sadiq Khan winning the mayoral election?
Well, there was this rumour swept around, as you knew, that the Tories had done a lot better, and it was based actually on she'd done very well in the postal votes, which get opened up a little bit earlier. But that was Tory voters obviously getting the votes in. But the huge defeat for the Tories, a swing to Sadiq Khan, a swing against Andy Street in the West Midlands. What I thought was really significant in the West Midlands, which didn't really get picked up, Bev, George Galloway's candidate, the independent Muslim candidate, got 12% of the vote. That is major.
And therefore, if George Galloway fields MPs
Absolutely.
at the election, which he said he's going to do, in hundreds of seats, then he could make a
big difference
dent in the Labour votes.
And he's targeting Labour in the same way Reform are targeting the Tories. And I wrote about this in the Mail. They've particularly got their eyes on Angela Rayner. So Labour lost control in Oldham, 4 miles from Angela Rayner's constituency. They lost because of independent Muslims. Galloway won that by-election in Rochdale in February, 10 miles from Angela Rayner's constituency. So she's got pressure over her living arrangements and the tax stuff. She's got pressure from these independent Muslims. Of course, one of them, the Greens had a Muslim candidate, and that's gone very badly.
Well, hasn't it?
I forgot where the Green won, actually.
And also, I'm interested to know, as we go through the show this morning, and I'd love to hear from you at home, whether you think we can read too much into these local elections.
Yeah.
Not many people ever vote for their local councils, do they? I think it's about...
And they should.
30% turnout.
They should, because it's your refuse collection, it's your schools.
It's all the stuff that we really care about in your local area, actually. But whether we can extrapolate the results from last week, looking forward to the general election, possibly, possibly not. Now, moving on this morning, China is suspected of carrying out a massive hacking attack on Britain's Ministry of Defence.
So the Defence Secretary, Grant Shapps, will update MPs with a statement, we think, later on the cyber attack in which a database containing details of armed force personnel was targeted. They got details of their bank accounts.
Amazingly. So bank details, some addresses of serving personnel and veterans may have been compromised. So Olivia Utley is our political correspondent. She joins us now from Westminster. Good morning, Olivia. Good to see you. Just give us a little bit more information on this story. How has it come to light and how embarrassing is it for the British government?
Well, essentially what's happened is a database containing information about military personnel, including in some cases their addresses, their bank details, has been breached by what we think is China. Well, all the fingers are pointing at China at the moment. The Defence Secretary isn't willing to say the country, but it is very clearly China. We know that computers containing Ministry of Defence information, actual sensitive state secrets, etc., have not been hacked. It is simply this third-party computer system with details about military personnel. But even so, it's a pretty whopping breach and very, very embarrassing for the UK. It raises all sorts of questions. One of those questions is, what about other countries who have difficult relationships with China, countries in Europe, America, for instance? Will they be prepared to share information with the UK from now on if our security system seems to be so lax to allow breaches such as this? Another question, of course, for the government is, what line does it take on China? So far, Rishi Sunak has been relatively dovish on China. In the 2022 leadership election between him and Liz Truss, Truss said that she would designate China as a threat to the UK, an official threat to the UK. Rishi Sunak fell short of saying that. He's just said that China is a huge challenge, something that Work and Pensions Secretary Mel Stride has repeated this morning. Does this cyber attack change that? Will Rishi Sunak now go a step further and say that China is an official threat? Well, from what we're hearing, it doesn't really sound like it. It sounds as though, again, the government is going to turn this into some sort of fudge. There will be a statement from Grant Shapps later. He will say we expect that China is a challenge, but won't go as far as to say it's a threat. That is likely to incense Conservative backbench MPs. And obviously, at the moment, Rishi Sunak's position is pretty precarious. He can't really afford to lose the support of his backbenchers.
All right, Olivia, thank you for that, Olivia Utley. Well, let's talk to a very senior Conservative backbencher, Philip Davis, the Conservative MP for Shipley, well known to this station and this programme. Sir Philip, as he now is. Congratulations, Sir Philip, on your knighthood.
Thank you very much. It was very unexpected.
Well, richly deserved if MPs deserve knighthoods. You certainly deserve one. How anxious are backbench Tory MPs, ministers to Philip, about the relative ease with which China appeared to have hacked into the Ministry of Defence, no less, which is the first line of our defences?
No, this is hugely concerning. If anywhere is secure, it should be the Ministry of Defence. And so if another country has broken into that system with ease, then that is a massive area of concern. And of course, the relationship with China is complicated, isn't it? Because we do so much of our trade with China, but quite clearly they are our geopolitical opponents in many respects, and side with our opponents around the world. So it is a complicated relationship, but we can't shy away from the fact that China is not necessarily a force for good across the world.
Do we have enough good people in this country, Philip, working with the government on these sorts of issues?
It's a good question. I genuinely don't know the answer to that question. I mean, there were certainly lots of people who are a lot more expert than me in these matters who probably are working on these things, should be working on these things, and need to be working on these things. Yeah, look, I mean, China are an incredibly powerful country. They're an immensely sophisticated country, and we've got to be on our guard. And if our systems aren't good enough, they need to be improved pretty quickly. And this, I don't know how serious the consequences of this breach are, but it certainly needs to be a wake-up call to make sure that the Ministry of Defence is much more secure in the future.
And I guess the worry for individually, China could target some of these military personnel, potentially for blackmail, all sorts of other issues. But equally, the worry is that they can get into even more sophisticated parts of the Ministry of Defence involved actually in the defence of the realm.
Yeah, exactly. It's massively concerning. Who knows what they have access and what they haven't accessed, what they can access and what they can't. It's certainly a massive worry for anybody who's in the MOD, anybody who works in the armed forces. They'll obviously be feeling very vulnerable right now, and the government needs to do whatever they can to reassure those people and make sure that they are protected and their identities are protected from foreign countries. I mean, this is massively concerning, I think, for everybody. But and it clearly isn't good enough if the MOD can be breached in this way by a foreign power.
To, as we speak, Philip, the President of China, no great friend of this country, albeit I remember David Cameron had a beer with him at Chequers back in 2011. There he is, grandstanding with Macron in France on a state visit. Interesting, isn't it? Because France are meant to be a great global ally of ours, and yet here he is, President Macron, consorting with what I would regard the head of, effectively, a rogue state.
Yeah, look, Andrew, I mean, I appreciate that sentiment. I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult for all countries because, look, we are hugely reliant on trade with China. And there's no getting away from that. And if we didn't trade with China, our economy would be in a much worse place and people would be paying a lot more for their goods and inflation would go up and all the consequences of that. So we have a very, very complicated relationship with China, as do France, as does really every other country in the world, including, for example, the United States, who are very sensitive about that relationship and are very worried. I think what we need to do as a country, and we need to work with all of our allies on this, is to be less dependent on China for trade, particularly in areas that are strategically important. And I think we've got to work with the US and France and all of our Western allies to make sure that we're not so dependent on China for the trade in important goods, because this is a big security risk for us.
Well, talking of powerful global leaders, Lib Dem leader Sir Ed Davey is saying today that the Conservatives need to wake up, smell the coffee, back giving the country the election that it desperately needs and wants, and he's going to try and overthrow the government this morning. Is he going to get anywhere with this no confidence bill today?
No, absolutely not. I mean, the thing is, he's got a brass neck, hasn't he, Ed Davey? If there's one person that the country hasn't got any confidence in after the debacle of the post office and his shambolic role in it, it's Sir Ed Davey, which is why he kept quiet and out of sight for weeks and weeks on end. So, I mean, he has got a brass neck, I'll give him that. I don't know whether to admire it or be appalled by it. But look, no, I mean, look, there's going to be a general election. There's going to be a general election the same way there always is in our constitution. And the Prime Minister will decide when that is within the same timescale. Was Ed Davey having a vote of confidence when Gordon Brown wasn't calling a general election and went to the wire in 2010? I can't recall that. I mean, if anybody listens to Ed Davey, they want looking at, to be honest.
But if we listen to Rishi Sunak, those local election results and mayoral election results, Philip, weren't as bad as all that. And he's clung to one study which shows that perhaps we could be in a hung parliament. That study, of course, omitted Scotland from its calculations, which is pretty much going to be a Labour stronghold at the next election. I mean, overall, if you were honest, Philip, and I know you are an honest man, the results were pretty awful for the Tories.
Yeah, we got a kick-in the elections. We got a kick-in the local elections, in the by-election, in the mayoral elections. We got a kick-in. The public wanted to give us a kick-in. They're frustrated. They're not happy. They're frustrated about lots of things. I'm frustrated about lots of things. They're frustrated about, particularly immigration, legal and illegal immigration. And basically what the voters are saying is that, you know, we wanted to give you a kicking, and you have to, as a politician, you have to listen to what the public say and accept it, take it on the chin, and then come out and try and address those issues and come out fighting. So, yeah, they were very bad results. The only glimmer of hope, really, is that if you look underneath the bonnet, they weren't actually great results for Labour either. That's the bit that I think that we can see. You know, that, yeah, they won the West Midlands mayoral election, but they won it with fewer votes than they actually got when they lost in 2021. They won the Blackpool South by-election, but they won it with fewer votes than they got in their terrible result in 2019. So, look, there's lots of people out there who are clearly frustrated with us, and we get that. We understand that. You know, we're frustrated about some of these things too. But they're clearly not persuaded by Labour either. And we've got 6 months or so, or whatever the Prime Minister calls the election, to show the public that actually we are on the right track, we are doing the right things, we do understand their concerns, and that we're much better placed than Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner to solve them. And I think there are clearly lots of votes still up for grabs for the general election.
All right, Philip, thank you. Sir Philip Davis.
Sir Philip, yeah. I'm going to bow to him next time I see him.
We won't. Up next, the Green Party is investigating a councillor who shouted Allahu Akbar after his election and said that Palestinians had the right to fight back after the October the 7th attack. Should it be booted out of politics completely? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
King Charles is well known for his views on climate change, and apparently he's now taking steps to make sure that his Sandringham estate is more eco-friendly. Well, it's being reported that the King is planning to have 2,000 solar panels installed on that estate, and it's set to make the estate largely self-sufficient with a supply of its own green electricity. Well, joining me now is former Royal correspondent, the absolute legend, that is Michael Cole. Michael, twice in 2 days, I feel blessed. Look, King Charles has long been talking up his eco-credentials. Some may uncharitably compare him to Greta Thunberg in a tweed suit. It's one thing, however, to be self-sufficient in energy, but got to be said, solar panel farms, they're hardly eco-friendly, are they? They destroy environments. What's your take?
I certainly agree with that. The King has indeed, as you say, Martin, and good afternoon to you, applied for planning permission. Now, this is going to be a bit of a mini solar farm, 2,000 solar panels on a site of 2 hectares. And as he has the Sandringham estate, 20,000 acres, 4 acres isn't going to be very much, and it's nowhere near where he lives at Sandringham House. Now, these things, which we're seeing on the screen, are hugely controversial up here. A monster one is being planned on the borders between Suffolk and Cambridge, and the people there really despise it. As they say quite rightly, is this grade A agricultural land being turned over to this semi-industrial use and spoiling the look of the countryside and changing it in a negative way.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good morning, it's 9:50. Alistair has got in touch and said if any political party is gaslighting on the UK economy, it is Labour. They constantly talk down the UK for political purposes, which inevitably harms consumer confidence and therefore the economy. We're going to be hearing from Rachel Reeves this morning, but that is the line from Labour this morning, that the Conservatives are apparently gaslighting the British public on the economy. Now, you busy?
No, I am. I'm writing about the Green Party.
He's doing his to-do list.
No, it's the Green Party. Just looking at what this terrible person has said.
Now then, the Green Party is investigating a councillor who shouted Allah Akbar, which translates to God is the greatest in Arabic, after being elected, and said that Palestine had the right to fight back.
He actually went much further. His name is Mohsin Ali. He won the Gipton and Hare Hills ward in Leeds with more than 3,000 votes at Thursday's local election. Take a listen to what he said.
We will not be silent. We will raise the voice of Gaza. We will raise the voice of Palestine. Allahu Akbar!
Well,
what a wally.
And bear in mind, what a Leeds councillor can do about a war in Gaza is not the point. But he also said, this particular man, he was involved in some appalling remarks about a Leeds University chaplain, a rabbi who's now had to go into hiding.
This is all prior to him winning.
Prior to him winning. And my own newspaper, the Daily Mail, alerted the Green Party about this in February, and they said, we support free speech. Now this full scale of what he said about this chaplain has come to light. It's changing slightly. He also said Hamas was justified in the murder of people in that October the 7th attack.
Very worrying, particularly for Jewish people, of course. Well, the Green Party spokesman has said the Green Party is investigating issues drawn to our attention in relation to Councillor Mohsin Ali, so cannot comment further. However, we're clear that we never support anything that extols violence. We're joined now by Chris Blackhurst, former editor of The Independent. Morning, Chris. Morning.
Hi, good morning.
Have the Greens got themselves into a not at least controversial, if not a slightly dangerous situation with this character?
They're in a dilemma. I mean, they clearly want free speech, freedom of expression and all that, and that's what they stand for. Look, it's what I believe in. It's what my newspaper campaigned for many years. On the other hand, this guy's language is so extreme, so hate-filled. There's no justification for it. I cannot see how he can possibly be a councillor. I mean, you know, if you assume a councillor is there to serve all the community, this man, with his views, cannot be serving all the community, and I just don't see how they can really waste any more time on him. I mean, what he's saying is really actually extremely shocking.
And Chris, it's all very well the Lib Dems the Greens saying we're investigating.
Freudian slip there.
Yes, Freudian slip. The Greens saying we're investigating, but they were made aware of what he'd said before the local election in May, but they said free speech is free speech. But anyone who thinks it can justify what happened with the Hamas massacre of all those Israelis on October 7th, that's not free speech, that's hate. That is hate.
Yeah, it's just hate. I'm puzzled why it took them so long. I can attribute a certain woolliness to the Greens. I don't think as a party they do anything that quickly. They've probably not been, I can't remember if they've been in this situation before. I mean, this is a situation that would be fairly familiar to Labour and the Tories and indeed the Lib Dems. I mean, they're forever disciplining candidates and MPs and people like that. It's probably new to the Greens. Whether they've got procedures, I don't know.
Yeah.
Look, they're probably scared. I mean, you know, this guy has...
We've run out of time, Chris.
Oh.
Nice to see you. I'm so sorry. It was short but sweet. Here's the weather with Craig.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Over the next couple of days, high pressure is starting to build in across the UK. That's introducing something a bit more dry and settled than what we've been used to. So out there, first thing this morning, a bit of a dull start for a lot of us, but there is some sunshine along the south coast of England, parts of Northern Ireland and the far north of Scotland. The cloud will be thick enough in places to produce some spots of rain, and a few showers may well just develop further south, but for most it is a drier picture compared to Monday. And come the afternoon, hopeful a lot of the UK will see some bright spells. The cloud will be stubborn across parts of Scotland and northeast England, so feeling quite chilly here right throughout the day. Into the evening, clearing skies initially, but that will allow some mist and a low cloud to form. And then towards the very end of the night, just watching this next band of cloud and rain, it may well just start to approach the far northwest of Scotland. Under the cloud cover, temperatures not falling much lower than around 8 to 10 degrees, but where we do see some clear skies, bit of a chilly start on Wednesday, but here we will see some sunshine. Elsewhere, a bit of a dull start, but the mist and low cloud will begin to burn away. So come the afternoon, I'm fairly optimistic. A lot of us seeing some sunny spells. The exceptions really across the very far northwest of Scotland, maybe the far northwest of Northern Ireland too. Here we see some cloud and some rain, but in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs potentially reaching 20 or 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In West Yorkshire, the A639 is closed each way off junction 7 of the M621 at Belle Isle after a fire at a derelict pub. On the M60 in Greater Manchester, there's a lane closed anti-clockwise after an accident between junction 17 and 16 from Prestwich to Pendlebury. There are queues back along the M62 from junction 19 at Haywood, and delays the other way back beyond junction 13 of the M60 at Worsley. On the M1 in Leicestershire, there's a lane closed each way for emergency repairs between junctions 24 and 25 between Kegworth and the A52, taking nearly half an hour in queues from junction 26. There's widespread disruption to train services across the southeast of England because of industrial action. And on the M25 in Surrey, there's a lane closed clockwise just after the Cobham services where someone's broken down. There are queues back beyond junction 9 at Leatherhead. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 7th of May. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce.
Defence under attack. China is suspected being behind the hacking of the Ministry of Defence targeting military personnel. We're just not being tough enough on them, are we? The Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, told us this earlier.
This is a third-party data set that appears to have been compromised. That has been shut down immediately by the Ministry of Defence.
And a cybercrime warning to all of us. Facebook and Instagram are the source of 1 in 50 crimes. We'll tell you what they are and how you might be able to avoid being a victim.
And the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, waiting for this. She's about to speak live about how the Tories, she say, are gaslighting the public about the state of the economy.
And the UK Eurovision entrant, Ollie Alexander, says that the Union Jack flag can be divisive and nationalistic. That's sort of the point. It's a flag.
An idiot. I've got a confession, I rather like Eurovision. Last year's
why
entry...
does that not surprise me?
Yeah, last year's entry, whose name I can't remember, she, it turned out, in 2020 said, quotes unquote, "I hate Britain." Well, the jury hated her because she came 26th out of 27. This is just not the way to get the people on your side.
No. Will you be watching the Eurovision Song Contest
or listening
this weekend, or listening to it? It doesn't float my boat, I can't lie. gbnews.com/your say is the comments portal where you can talk directly to me and Andrew this morning. Get in touch with us. First, though, the very latest news headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Talks will resume in Cairo today after Israel rejected a ceasefire proposal that was accepted by the Hamas terror group. Israel's Prime Minister says the terms of the agreement are far from meeting its core demands. But Benjamin Netanyahu said he would send a delegation to Egypt today to continue the ceasefire talks. It comes after a night of airstrikes, with the Israeli military now in control of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, told GB News that blocking the flow of aid would have devastating consequences.
The idea that Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I specifically name him because I don't believe many people, as many people in Israel, are supportive of this, now wants to close down the Rafah crossing along with the Erez crossing in the north, and then Karim Shalom as well. It means that more and more people will face famine. The humanitarian aid is not getting in. So this is compounding the matters. Charging into Rafah with those tanks is as bad as charging into Gaza in the first place. There's an absence of strategy as to where Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to go with this. And we saw things escalate very quickly with Iran. That could easily happen again.
China is suspected of carrying out a massive hacking attack on Britain's Ministry of Defence. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is due to update MPs on the cyber attack, in which a database containing details of armed forces personnel was targeted. It means bank details and some addresses of serving personnel and veterans may have been compromised. Cabinet Minister Mel Stride says the government took immediate action after discovering the breach.
This is a third-party data set that appears to have been compromised. That has been shut down immediately by the Ministry of Defence in terms of external access to it. And it may be that Grant Shapps has more to say later on this, whether this is China or another state actor as well. So we do take this very seriously, but at the end of the day also, they are a very important economic partner, and we have global challenges like climate change that we need to engage with China in order to address.
And let's cross now to central London, where Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves is giving a speech on the state of the economy.
But it's about who you are. Because if you're a young person starting out in life, if you're at work and starting a family, or if you're planning for or in retirement, this Labour Party will fight for you. This Labour Party will serve your interests, and we will continue to work to earn your trust. This week, while the Tories squabble about which way to turn, talking only to themselves, I want to talk instead about what's going on in the country, about the state of family budgets and the future of our economy. Because Keir and I know that if we are to change our country, to invest sustainably in our public services and to make working people better off, then building a stronger, more dynamic economy must come first. So today, I want to take head-on the claims that we can expect to hear from Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt in the weeks ahead, to tackle the economic fiction being peddled by government ministers, to show that the path towards decline is not inevitable, that Labour is ready to serve the interests of the British people, and to make the case for change. By the time of the next election, we can expect, and we should expect, interest rates to be lower, Britain to be out of recession, and inflation to have returned to the Bank of England's target. Indeed, these things could happen this month. I already know what the Prime Minister and the Chancellor will say in response to one or all of these events happening. They've been saying it for months now. Our plan is working. The economy is turning a corner. Stick with us. In fact, that's almost exactly what the Prime Minister said in his statement following the disaster that was the Conservatives' local election performance last week. But I want to take those arguments head on, because they do not speak to the economic reality. During the local elections, I travelled right across the country. I spoke to hundreds of people. I listened to their concerns. The family from Redcar, the dad doing an apprenticeship, the mum working in a supermarket, who spend every evening talking about money because there's not enough to pay the bills. The small business owner in Milton Keynes, desperate to expand, but faced with a system of business rates that are stacked against them. The worker at the train manufacturer Hitachi, based in Newton Aycliffe, who trained up for what he thought was going to be a job for life, but now finds that that is all at risk, thanks to this government's actions. When they hear government ministers telling them that they have never had it so good, that they should look out for the feel-good factor, all they hear is a government that is deluded and totally out of touch with the realities on the ground. The Conservatives are gaslighting the British public. They say we've turned a corner, but try telling that to the 6.4 million households across England and Wales last year who saw their rent increase or who had to remortgage, or the 950,000 families whose mortgage deal is due to expire between now and January next year. They say the plan is working. Is this the same plan that has meant that this is forecast to be the first Parliament on record with living standards at the end lower than they were at the start? Real household income on course to have fallen by £240 per person in that time. Our economy smaller per person than it was than when Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, and forecast by the OECD to grow by just 1% next year, weaker than every other G20 country except for Russia. And they ask people to stick with the Conservative Party. But it is those very Conservatives who are set to leave the average household £870 worse off through stealth taxes and increases in council tax. The Prime Minister claims that he is delivering for the country. But the British people did not order what this Prime Minister is delivering.
So that's Rachel Reeves, who is the Shadow Chancellor, who will be in an historic position after the general election, because the polls look, it's pretty clear they're going to win the general election. She will be our first woman, the Chancellor Exchequer. But Bev, I'm not sure she's using the right word, accusing the Tories of gaslighting us.
I don't think
Can you tell me what she means by that?
Gaslighting is a term of sort of psychological manipulation and domestic abuse. If, for instance, your partner said to you, we're going to go and see some friends this weekend, and you said, you didn't tell me about that, and he said, I did tell you about that, your memory's going a bit dim. It's trying to make people think that they're losing their minds. It's a very tried and tested abuse technique, actually. It's not the kind of phrase you should really use just casually.
No, and also, I mean, I get
That's not what the government are doing to people.
Look, they might be trying to mislead us into saying the economy is much better than we think, and they're not responsible for the bad bits, they're only responsible for the good bits. But I wouldn't have used the word gaslighting. And I also think they're losing the room with it.
I do, because I think it's too opaque, that word, to use. It's not going to land with people because people don't really know what gaslighting is often. And I mean, by all means, say the government are lying to you, or they're misleading you, or they are trying to make things look shinier and better than they are.
Which is what governments always do.
Gaslighting.
No.
So I think they've chosen the wrong.
It's interesting. Well, let's talk to the former Labour Special Advisor, Paul Richards, who's advised ministers and politicians for many years. Paul, morning to you. Look, Labour are on a roll here, and they've had very good local election results, very good mayoral results. Nobody, apart from Rishi Sunak, seems to believe anything else to be true. Big speech here by Rachel Reeves. Is she using the right expression here, talking about gaslighting? Because it baffles both Bev and I. And we don't often agree.
Well, that's a fair point, actually, because it's one of those sort of it's sort of social media word, really, isn't it, that people talk about on Twitter. But I don't think it really cuts through substantially. But I mean, the main point of the speech isn't the word. The main point of the speech is that the economy is in the toilet, and that the Tories are going to try and persuade us otherwise over the next few weeks. There's some glimmers of hope in the economy appear with figures coming out later on, but people don't feel it. So I suppose what she's trying to say is that there's a gap between the Tory rhetoric and how people are feeling in their pay packets.
Don't you think people... And I agree with you, John, Paul, and I think the whole point of the next general election will be the Tories can talk about immigration and Rwanda as much as they like. Ultimately, people will decide, do they feel better or worse off than they did perhaps when they last voted in the general election? And even though inflation is falling, prices are still going up and mortgages are going up, and I think that's where the election will be fought and lost.
And isn't that always true, though, Andrew? I mean, all elections are fought ultimately on, do you feel better off than you did 4 years ago? How's your pay packet? How's your mortgage? How's your rent? And that's the thing. Those are the things that Rachel is talking about as we speak. She's making the point that so many people's mortgage deals are about to go off a cliff, the fact that so many more people are paying bigger rents than they were. And it's the first parliament on record, we think, where the standard of living is less good now than it was when the parliament was elected. So that's what she's talking about. I wouldn't fixate on the spin around this word, sort of gaslighting. I mean, it's taken from a movie that nobody's seen, isn't it? And I think most people don't even know what it really means. I mean, as you say, Bev, it does allude to domestic abuse and so on. So perhaps not a great choice of word, but the substantive economic message is really, really strong. And having just come off those local elections you were talking about, I mean, this is what's coming up on doorsteps. You know, I knocked on thousands of doors. One person mentioned Gaza, but hundreds of people mentioned their pay, their rent, their mortgage, the holes in the road, the fact they couldn't get a dentist or a doctor. You know, this is what people are talking about.
It's also quite offensive, I think, in some ways to the voters, because if you're telling someone they're being gaslit, what you're basically saying to them is, you are too stupid to see that you're being manipulated in a way. It was apparently this was the word of 2022 because, as you say, Paul, it's kind of all over social media in a way. But it just completely fails to land. There's enough dissatisfaction in the country without telling people you can't trust the government and you might be too stupid to know when they're lying to you. The British public already know that things are bad. They don't need Rachel Reeves to tell us that we need to pay attention. We're already paying attention.
I think the idea is that it's just sort of the idea of being misled, I think, rather than necessarily, being sort of manipulated. It's just the idea that they're trying to tell us one thing, but we all know something different. I think that's the idea of today's speech. And she is a world-class economist, so it's all going to be backed up by figures. And, GB News viewers will know full well how they feel in terms of their personal economics. Do they feel better off or worse off? I mean, the vast majority are going to feel the pinch. And I know I do, and I'm sure you do too. It is a reality. So, like I say, let's not fixate on this word. It'll grab a few headlines, I'm sure, tomorrow. But the bigger point is that we need change in the economy. And that's what she's articulating in this speech. As I say, as we are speaking, she is speaking and setting it out. So we'll find out what she says later on, no doubt. But, the big point is the economy is doing really badly, no matter what the government tries to tell us.
On the local elections, Paul, we've agreed that Labour did very, very well and the Tories did very badly. The Greens also did very well, but are they now discovering the price that sometimes has to be faced when you are successful? Because there's a big fuss now, and quite rightly in my view, about the Leeds councillor who was elected last Thursday. He's called Mohsin Ali, who social media feeds have shown that he called the Hamas attack on Israel justified. He was part of a campaign which has led to a former Leeds University chaplain going into hiding. The Green Party are now saying, we're investigating. We can't say anything until we've done our investigation, but there's overwhelming evidence they were made aware before the election of this man's offensive views, but they decided free speech triumphs all. But of course it doesn't, does it?
No, it really doesn't, and he's not an isolated incident either. This guy is he's a symbol of a move into the Green Party and away from the fringes of the Labour Party, but also the sort of the broader Corbynite kind of left into the Greens, en masse, taking with them some of the odious views, particularly around anti-Semitism, that Labour has kicked out. And the Green Party is now the new host for some of these really repellent views, and he just happens to be a bloke who's in the news for saying it out loud. But there's a real phenomenon now, which is, political scientists are starting to identify, which is now the Green Party is no longer just about the climate and wind turbines and anything else. It's now a receptacle for a kind of anti-West, anti-Semitic strain of politics, which Labour has substantially dealt with, but the Green Party is only just starting to have to deal with. And it's a really, really a big issue that we're going to have to unearth.
There's one Muslim pressure group, of course, who've made 18 demands on Keir Starmer and said you only get the Muslim vote if you will accede to these particular requests, one of which is the right to pray, Muslim children to be able to pray in schools. I mean, it's really I thought it was quite a sinister list of demands for one specific group of people. How does Keir Starmer handle that? Because the Muslim vote is important to Labour.
Well, I've said to you before that I don't think there is such a thing as the Muslim vote.
Well, 70% of Muslims in this country, 70% of Muslims in this country traditionally have voted for Labour.
But the idea that this huge group of people, over 2 million people, are all going to think and vote identically. And what we do see, though, is very concentrated voting patterns in certain wards, in certain seats. But it's not a sort of mass thing. And this is a pressure group putting pressure on the Labour Party. There's lots of people trying to do that. So I'm sure Sir Keir Starmer will look at it in the round and decide what's best for the nation and what's best for the country and for the party. But he's not going to just go through the list of 18, some of which are absolutely balmy ideas, dismantling Israel, for example, and say, yeah, it's great. And he's going to do the right thing rather than the thing to try and hoover up a few votes. And they're quite right, too.
OK.
All right, it's Paul Richards, former Labour Special Advisor. We must read a statement from the Green Party. They say this: the Green Party is investigating issues drawn to our attention in relation to Councillor Mohsin Ali. This is the person in Leeds, so cannot comment further. However, we're clear that we never support anything that extols violence. Can I be quite clear? This Green Party was was told clearly in February by my newspaper. We have the emails to show this man's offensive anti-Semitic comments, including justifying Hamas's invasion of Israel, the worst attack on Israeli soil effectively since the Holocaust. So the Green Party knew all about it. We just need to put that on the record.
Right, still to come this morning, our Eurovision Song Contest entry, Ollie Alexander, says that the Union Jack flag is divisive and nationalistic. Does he really deserve to represent us?
Does he not know what a flag is?
This weekend. There's one type of flag. I'm sure he knows what it is. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Scotland, home of Hamza Yousaf's hate crime law, aka the CLIPES Charter.
CLIPE,
a delightfully Scottish word for a grass, a snitch, or in the context of Russell Finley's opening gambit during the hate crime debate at Holyrood last week, reporting your friends, family and neighbours to the police for alleged hate crimes. The SNP responded by doubling down on the new law's ability to protect vulnerable victims.
I am confident that we have robust legislation that will protect those who are vulnerable to harm.
But other victims are emerging in the wake of this new legislation. As the bill moved through Parliament, concerns rose of police inundated with vexatious complaints, targeting individuals who had committed no crimes. The first fortnight of the new law gave rise to nearly 9,000 complaints.
The vast majority, at least 95%, have been deemed not to be crimes.
False reporting is nothing new. A social post from Scottish Conservative Murdo Fraser was flagged by a trans rights activist in November.
Police decided that no crime had been committed, but nevertheless that was recorded as a non-crime hate incident.
And Alba Westminster leader Neil Hanvey says he too has been targeted under pre-existing legislation.
I've been the victim of at least one of those complaints, and that's taken up the time of police officers.
Thick skin can be expected of our elected officials, but what about the public? 74-year-old Morag McDougall-Brown says she was reported to police by a neighbour, and the experience has taken its toll.
I hate to think that anybody like me or similar to my age would ever have to go through this, because I really don't think I will ever go over it.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
(10:22). You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Did you forget where we were?
I did. It's so hot in here.
Oh,
We could be on
with your memory. I'm gaslighting you.
Yeah, we could be on the Costa del Brava because it's so hot in here. Because it's packed up again.
Right, we are joined by former advisor Boris Johnson, Lord Culver Ranger, and GB News' senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Thank you both very much.
Let's talk to the boys first about local elections, actually, because Nigel, you and I, we've cut through. We've had all the spin thrown at us for years and years. You cannot in any way say this was anything other than pretty disastrous for the Tories.
No, it was. Well, I would put it as very, very bad, but just short of a catastrophe.
Yeah.
A catastrophe would have been Ben Houchen losing in Tees Valley, and also 600 councillors lost. So he lost just under 500. Yeah. So it is really dismal. What is crazy is for Rishi Sunak to use the so-called national projected vote figures to say that there'll be a hung parliament at the end of it. Those figures are all about what might have happened if local elections had been held everywhere in the country.
Yeah.
1 in 5 people vote differently at a general election. Didn't take into account Wales, where there were no elections, or Scotland, or really the effect of reform. So the figures become meaningless, and you feel like the Rishi Sunak is clutching at straws just to say, hey, look,
Just one thing. I thought Labour would have done better in terms of share of the vote because they weren't up on last year. That doesn't show that he's rampaging.
No, that's
number
right.
10. He's sort of limping. Yeah. Starmer. We're talking about Starmer.
Going at a fast walk, perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's absolutely right. That there are areas about the vote that should worry them. The Muslim vote should worry them. I mean, certainly in areas where there were, whether or not. Or it's not as if all Muslims vote the same way.
No.
But in areas
they have
where...
voted as a bloc, though.
70% of British Muslims vote for Labour, we know that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, in areas where there were 20% Muslim voters, Labour lost 18 points.
Yeah.
So that's a sign that something is going on there. And in fact, that Pat McFadden, the election coordinator, is saying, yeah, we must look at that. That's something they must deal with.
Colville? I was very sorry to see Andy Street go. I've known Andy for a long time, former chief executive of John Lewis, when I first knew him. Whether you were Labour, Tory or Lib Dem, he had a very good reputation as mayor of West Midlands.
West Midlands, yes. And, you know, full disclosure, I sit on an advisory board for Andy on the digital side of things in the West Midlands. He's been a powerhouse for the area. He's been that flag waver. He's brought investment, jobs, growth. From any measure, he's been a fantastic mayor. And so we have to look at... Well, that's the exact question. We have to look at the politics. It's always hard. Local mayors trying to fight a battle when the incumbent government is not popular. We faced that in 2012 when Boris was fighting, and it was said Boris defied the laws of political gravity to win that election because we were a national government
as London mayor.
As London mayor. So it's very hard for incumbent Tory mayors to win when there's a Tory government, especially after a long time in government.
And if reform hadn't stood, 30,000 votes, Andy lost by 1,500.
You're right. And I think that's something we've got to look at. But also, just stepping back on those elections, there's an issue here of where is the Conservative vote. That turnout in Blackpool South was very low. 60% at the 2019 general election, just over 30% in this by-election. It tells you the Conservative vote didn't materialise, it's still there. And I think talking heads like Nigel and myself have to be very careful of telling the British public that this is a done deal in terms of this election. No vote has been cast. There's at least 6 months. That might not be a very long time, but it's still long enough in politics for things to change.
The thing about local council elections, of course, is they traditionally appeal to an older voter. So we probably didn't have many young people coming out and voting in the local elections. And in the general election, the younger people are more likely to vote for Labour as well, traditionally.
Well, yes, I mean, it does break down in an age range that the older you are, the more likely you are to be Tory. So over 65s tend to be Tory.
What went wrong with you, then?
Pardon?
What went wrong with you?
Yeah, I stayed with them all the way through. And then the younger you're absolutely right, Bev, the younger voters tend to move towards Labour. And I think Calvi is right, that you haven't had a single vote casted in a general election yet, so we can't know. Opinion polls as well, they give you the general direction of travel, which I believe more than these projected figures that have come out, but only the general direction. Most polls don't take in undecided voters. They're registered as non-voters, which of course they won't be come election time. And even when you do a deep delve into polls, the MRP polls, so-called, that do it, they go into census data to try and get a more accurate picture, but then they make assumptions like if you're a university-educated 30-year-old man and you're single, they predict how you will vote in every part of the country. That doesn't work either.
No, exactly.
What do you make of Rachel Reeves this morning, Culver, saying that the Conservatives are gaslighting the British public over the economy? Do you think it even makes sense as a concept?
No, I think it's a strange use of language. It's sort of... We're bringing in mental health concepts into a political debate. And I think, actually, Labour have to be very careful. They might think it's trendy to use this type of language. So I think it's opportunist. It's not really political. I think people shouldn't be getting mixed messages from politicians about mental health and where politics is. And I'm actually quite concerned about that use of language.
Yeah, I am. Nigel, what do you make of it?
Well, I mean, Culvey is right, that what it means is psychological manipulation, so it does have a psychological aspect. What it also means is pretending things are one way when they're not. So the idea that Rishi Sunak is talking about how well the economy is going to do, it's going to do better, but it's not going to do great. And we're still in the same situation come election time in 6 months where will people feel better off? Are they still most worried about cost of living, as all the polls show? In which case, that things are not better for them.
But why she's still
of course she's still talking.
I think you can talk the economy down, but we're still doing better than a lot of our European competitors. The economy, Nigel says, might not do better. There's hypotheses there, there's projections, and we know what we find with all these projections, they tend to be wrong. So the economy
the OECD ones.
We've had a very short recession. We know interest rates are going to come down. Rachel Reeves herself has said that inflation will come down. So what the government has been doing, and what the Prime Minister has been doing, is working.
Well, hang on.
That's fact.
It's nothing to do with him that inflation has come down. That's the first thing.
Well, the government sets the target,
all the Prime Minister
Nigel
could have done is made inflation worse.
I do take an issue with that point, because the government sets the objectives for the Bank of England to what they are to do. And that's why when they say the inflation has come down, that's down to the government telling the Bank of England that's what they want to see the Bank of England
Yes, but it's the Bank of England which actually does it, and it does it on the basis of interest rates. It's the only real weapon they've got to deal with inflation. inflation. Bank of England is independent of government, so they will decide how much interest rates must go up or down by.
That's right. They decide how they do it, but the government decides what they do.
Well, but everyone's going to say they want inflation down, aren't they?
But Nigel's always blame the Tories when interest rates go up, but when they come down, it's nothing to do with
No, it's all the Bank of England's success. And I think this is why we...
I don't think I do. I don't think you always blame the Tories when interest rates go up.
You blame the Tories for everything. You do, Nigel, you do.
Well, I think that's totally fair, actually. But I mean, on the Bank of England, it is their independence that decides that, so they deal with that. On the overall economy, what Rishi Sunak is talking about is how much better things are going to be. And it doesn't matter how we compare with Europe or the rest of the world. What matters come election time is how British people feel about their finances.
Which is not good at the moment. Right.
No.
You two will be back in the next hour. Nigel and Colville. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Bev, thank you. It's 10:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Shadow Chancellor says Britain's economy is in a worse state than many people think. In a speech in London a short time ago, Rachel Reeves said the Conservative government were gaslighting the British people.
The Conservatives are gaslighting the British public. They say we've turned a corner, and they ask people to stick with the Conservative Party. But it is those very Conservatives who are set to leave the average household £870 worse off through stealth taxes and increases in council tax. The Prime Minister claims that he is delivering for the country. But the British people did not order what this Prime Minister is delivering.
Talks will resume in Cairo today after Israel rejected a ceasefire proposal that was accepted by the Hamas terror group. Israel's Prime Minister says the terms of the agreement are far from meeting its core demands. Benjamin Netanyahu said he would send a delegation to Egypt today to continue the ceasefire talks. It comes after a night of airstrikes with the Israeli military now in control of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. China is suspected of carrying out a massive hacking attack on Britain's Ministry of Defence. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is due to update MPs on the cyber-attack, in which a database containing details of armed forces personnel was targeted. It means bank details and some addresses of serving personnel and veterans may have been compromised. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2537 and €1.1649 euros. The price of gold is £1,847 and 36 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,300 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
10:33, still to come, the mother of 29-year-old Martin Het. I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh. I don't know whether you heard Andrew Pierce.
I was just wondering if I've got time to spend a penny.
We're going to be talking to an amazing woman.
Yeah.
She is the mother of 29-year-old Martin Het. He was killed tragically, you may remember, during the Manchester Arena bombing. Well, she is walking 200 miles to campaign for stronger protections against terrorism in public places. And our reporter will be talking to her live later this morning. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. You can go for a wee now.
I can now. Very good.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. On the M1 in Leicestershire, there's a lane closed each way for emergency repairs between junctions 24 and 25, between Kegworth and the A52, causing long delays. On the M6 in the West Midlands, there's a lane closed northbound where someone's broken down between junctions 5 and 6 towards Spaghetti Junction, Birmingham. Delays towards and past there. On the M25 in Hertfordshire, there's a lane closed anti-clockwise where a lorry's broken down just after junction 24 at Potters Bar, with queues halfway back to junction 28 for the A12. The M25 from Essex into Kent is closed clockwise over the QE2 bridge for an investigation investigation with queues almost back to junction 29 for the A127. There's widespread disruption to train services across the southeast of England this morning. There's industrial action, no service on a number of routes and limited service on a number of others. And in Dorset Way and Poole is closed eastbound after an accident causing queues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I have to say, the jam issue is
It's all very WI, isn't it?
Well, it's ridiculous. Now there's a picture of a friend of hers who's lying on the grass, cuddling a bowl in which the jam is placed in the middle with lemons round it, and a dog lying next to her. So she's holding this as if it's someone else that she really loves. I think, well, Meghan would have organised that because she'd have given her the present. I think this is too far. I mean, it's jam.
It's stupid as well.
Yes.
I mean, if any of us were to bring out a product, Isabella might associate with jam. No, I could see, I could see how that would
Sticky
work.
jam.
Yeah, but Meghan Markle, why?
Well, what was her website called? Twiggy or Tiggy?
No,
or
I've
something
got it
back
down
in the
because I
day?
can't remember. America. Oh, Tig, the Tig.
Tig. She used to be quite, a lifestyle guru pre-Harry. So she's trying to go back to look at what I'm wearing, look at what I'm eating. I can get everybody to buy my product.
And what the chickens should have in my garden.
Do you actually think jam crosses her lips? Would you?
Of course, way too much sugar
but
in
they
there.
also say it comes from her garden. I mean, how many strawberries has she got? Does it mean 50 people, that's only enough for them? It's not going to have thousands of people asking for jam. We won't have it. And there is a thing that she was cross that, she said, jealousy, really, that King Charles brings in all the food and the jam, things to make from somewhere else. He doesn't do it himself or get his staff to do it. But he gives it all the money to charity, right?
Yes, yes.
All this money is for Meghan. And it's sold out. And people have thought, well, actually, if we are going to get jam, if that's what's trendy, let's get it from the king, not from Meghan.
Not her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Get in touch with us this morning, won't you? gbnews.com/your say.
Well, it's almost 7 years on from the horrific Manchester Arena attack. The mother of one of the 22 victims is campaigning for more robust security at UK venues.
So for the past 5 years, Figan Murray, mum to Martin Hett, has worked alongside the Home Office to try and get Martin's Law passed.
Now, she begins her biggest push yet to get this over the line. She's going to walk 200 miles from the stadium in Manchester to number 10.
Here's Sophie Reaper. She sat down with her before the challenge began. Here she is.
On the 22nd of May 2017, 22 people went to a concert at Manchester Arena but never returned home. One of those people was Martin Hett, murdered by suicide bomber Salman Abedi.
It's 7 years nearly, and I still can't go to bed before about 11ish because I feel so ashamed and guilty as a mum because I was fast asleep in bed when he died, and I can't reconcile that. I've got a Martin-shaped hole in my soul somewhere, and that'll always be there.
After the attack, the Manchester Arena inquiry found serious failings in security on the night, which could have prevented it from happening. As a result, for the past 5 years, Figan has worked tirelessly to try and improve security at UK venues.
About 18 months after Martin died, we went to a theatre in Manchester, and there was absolutely no security, and that completely floored me. Then I looked into it and realised there's no legislation for security at all. And I wanted to change that. I just want venues and places, public places, to have a legal obligation to put security on and keep people safe.
This morning, Figan will begin a walk from the spot where her son died all the way to Downing Street. They'll arrive on the 7th anniversary of the attack, and until then, she wants as many people to get involved as possible.
People can join us on the walk at different stages and help us make the point, and I believe in people power, because really the government may stall the decision to get the legislation over the line, but the general public deserve to be safe and want to be kept safe.
Sophie Reaper, GB News.
I think parents like that who take such a tragic situation and try and pull something positive out of it are just remarkable.
Because you couldn't blame her if she was unable to get out of bed again.
Absolutely.
I mean, she had 5 children, 4 other children and a husband, and she was a counsellor, life coach. But it is an extraordinarily positive attitude. So we're going to be with her when she leaves the arena today, en route to number 10, and good luck with her campaign.
I think I remember where I was that weekend. I think we were both working for a rival media outlet that weekend.
Yeah. It was happening while I was on air, and I couldn't quite believe it would be a terror attack, because I thought, Arabella Grande, doesn't she appeal to particularly young people? Ariana Grande, doesn't she appeal to particularly young people? Because some of the victims were 12.
It was... I mean, luckily, we haven't... touch wood, but we haven't had something similar to that subsequently, have we? I think... And it was so shocking at the time, my hometown as well, in Manchester, and I remember I couldn't believe that 2 young men had been into a concert where there were all those children.
Yeah.
To commit that horrendous and just irrational, horrific act of violence.
22 dead, and then there's all the people, the trauma, the life-changing injuries that other people suffered that night. A complete nightmare.
And we're going to be, as we said, we're going to be talking to the mother who is walking from Manchester down to number 10. We'll see how she's getting on this morning. Keep your messages coming in, gbnews.com/your say. But let's go back to central London, where moments ago our economics and business editor Liam Halligan asked the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves a quick question at her conference.
The question is Liam Halligan from GB News.
Thank you, Shadow Chancellor. You talked about the need for strong institutions underpinning your secure economics vision, not least the Treasury, the Bank of England and the OBR. As a former Bank of England employee, you will surely have noticed last week when former Governor Mervyn King said in the Lords that the MPC was riven with groupthink and a lack of cognitive diversity. He was indeed reflecting the conclusions of a cross-party report from the House of Lords Economic Affairs Select Committee. Do you think that's a fair characterisation of the MPC, the former governor saying that that lack of cognitive diversity had added to instability, led to higher inflation than would otherwise be the case? And also, do you think the OBR should be stronger or weaker than it currently is? Specifically, should elected politicians take more notice or less notice of OBR forecasts, which have often been rather, to be fair, inaccurate?
Well, I think that we should respect independent economic institutions. And one of the reasons why we are in the mess that we are in today is because of the decisions of the Conservatives when Liz Truss was Prime Minister and Kwasi Kwarteng was Chancellor. It wasn't just the unfunded tax cuts that they promised, but it was also the undermining of the economic institutions that had previously made Britain a safe and secure place to invest. So sacking the respected Permanent Secretary of the Treasury, Tom Scholar, refusing to let the OBR do a forecast, even though they said they were able to, or spending the leadership campaign undermining the Bank of England. All of those contributed to the financial and economic crisis that we faced just 18 months ago. And I think the lessons from that is that we should respect more and listen more to those independent economic institutions rather than seek to further undermine them. And that would certainly be my approach as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Jane,
Brian Saby.
What are we doing about... Oh, we've got the...
Shadow Chancellor.
Do you know what you saw then from Rachel Reeves? Just a little bit of metal, a bit more than you normally see. She didn't... I don't know whether it was the phrase GB News that stuck in her throat when she said it. We had some surprise polling here on GB News just recently. We will find you the figures that we'll bring you in a moment.
It may surprise you who GB News viewers, listeners, are likely to vote for.
I've just found the figures. Because that's how efficient I am. Labour are 11 points ahead of the Conservatives when it comes to GB News viewers' voting intention. Labour have seen their vote share amongst GB News viewers increase by 13 points, while the Tory support have fractured. GB News viewers trust Labour more with the cost of living, NHS and housing. There you go, Rachel Reeves.
And, of course, a lot of Tory voters who watch GB News, listen to GB News, would have switched to Reform too.
That's right. Yeah, they did a little bit. 1 in 4 of GB News viewers who voted Conservative in 2019 have switched to Reform, so about 25%, well, 26% of you. So, Rachel Rees, if you're watching, you're always very welcome to come here and have a conversation with us. Come and have a coffee.
We might have a long wait, but we're happy to wait. Now, up next, will the SNP, that's the Scottish National Party, finally abandon its gender reforms after Dr Hilary Cass, who delivered that landmark report last month, gives evidence at the Scottish Parliament later today? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Over the next couple of days, high pressure is starting to build in across the UK. That's introducing something a bit more dry and settled than what we've been used to. So out there, first thing this morning, a bit of a dull start for a lot of us, but there is some sunshine along the south coast of England, parts of Northern Ireland and the far north of Scotland. The cloud will be thick enough in places to produce some spots of rain, and a few showers may well just develop further south, but for most it is a drier picture compared to Monday. And come the afternoon, hopeful a lot of the UK will see some bright spells. The cloud will be stubborn across parts of Scotland and northeast England, so feeling quite chilly here right throughout the day. Into the evening, clearing skies initially, but that will allow some mist and a low cloud to form. And then towards the very end of the night, just watching this next band of cloud and rain, it may well just start to approach the far northwest of Scotland. Under the cloud cover, temperatures not falling much lower than around 8 to 10 degrees, but where we do see some clear skies, bit of a chilly start on Wednesday, but here we will see some sunshine. Elsewhere, a bit of a dull start, but the mist and low cloud will begin to burn away. So come the afternoon, I'm fairly optimistic. A lot of us seeing some sunny spells. The exceptions really across the very far northwest of Scotland, maybe the far northwest of Northern Ireland too. Here we see some cloud and some rain, but in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs potentially reaching 20 or 21 degrees.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Very good morning. Feels like a Monday. It's actually a Tuesday, 10:48. Britain's Newsroom with me and Andrew. So Dr Hilary Cass, the leading paediatrician whose investigation into child gender healthcare led to a ban on puberty blockers, is to appear at the Scottish Parliament today.
So how will the Scottish National Party react, bearing in mind they've already been accused of placating the Greens by not adopting many of her recommendations?
So joining us now is co-director for For Women Scotland, Susan Smith. Good morning, Susan. I can see you smiling there. Did we sum up how the SNP might be feeling about Hilary Cass?
Well, actually, Hilary Cass has already appeared at the committee this morning. So it was actually quite a good session. There were some useful questions, and she was able to set the record straight on quite a lot of the myths that especially the Green Party have been trying to spread throughout Scotland. Obviously, the Greens are no longer part of the Butte House Agreement, so maybe with the change of leader, it'll give John Swinney an opportunity to row back. That's the sort of optimistic optimistic assessment. There are certainly people within the SNP who are not very happy about the direction of travel that was going on beforehand. But yeah, I think there will still be people who are going to be throwing the toys out of the pram at the prospect.
Susan, let's just remind people watching and listening, Downing Street stepped in for the first time since devolution to veto Hollywood's gender recognition reform bill. That veto was upheld by Scotland's court. Just remind people exactly what the SNP government was trying to enable young people to do, often without the parental consent.
So there's been a bit of a suite of bills that have been hugely problematic, but the GRR bill, which, as you say, was blocked by the Section 35 of the UK government, was to enable self-ID, so people to change their legal sex or gender simply by making a declaration and signing a form. And they wanted that to be for children as young as 16. And obviously, that has been pointed out as affirmative, this sort of affirmative action has been pointed out by Hilary Cass as being detrimental to young people because it often cements this idea that they have a gender identity. So what the Scottish government are proposing and what they've been doing for a very long time in schools and so on is to embed this notion that gender identity is real, that it's unchangeable, that children as young as 4 or 5 can have it, and that this needs to be affirmed by schools and parents and medical professionals. And what was happening in the Sandiford clinic, which is Scotland's answer to the Tavistock, was that children were being prescribed puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. And initially, after the Cass report came out, the Scottish government did not move to end this practice as the UK government did, and it wasn't until more recently that they've stopped prescribing puberty blockers. They claim they are leaving this up to clinicians, but it's a bit of a cop-out because obviously Hilary Cass is a clinician, and she was very clear that this is not good practice. So the fear has been that they are scraping around trying to find clinicians who will agree with what they say.
Yeah, and maybe, Susan, for you, the Cass report didn't go far enough because, of course, you can still get privately prescribed puberty blockers if you are a teen and you're desperate to change your gender.
Yes, she was asked actually this morning by one of the committee members about private prescriptions, and she said this is a concern for her. I think obviously her report was really into the NHS England and how they were doing it, but I think it's not unreasonable to say that private clinics should be following best practice as well, and that if there are considerable concerns about these drugs being offered on the NHS, they shouldn't be offered anywhere.
Yeah.
She also said, didn't she, that she didn't agree with the people who prescribe these terrible drugs, that actually sometimes the effects are not reversible.
Yes, and that was explored in quite a lot of detail, that we don't really know what the long-term effects of these drugs are, especially on brain development, on long-term effects on bones, on IQ development, on sexual function, on fertility. All of these things have been raised as concerns in the past, and there are no long-term studies, and she was very clear about the paucity of evidence. People considering this cohort in the long term, and the fact that we now have a very different cohort, of course, because what we've seen in recent years is this exponential rise in young women being referred to these clinics, whereas the initial, when puberty blockers, etc., were introduced in the Netherlands, it was mainly young men. So there's been no studies to ascertain why this is happening and the effect of these drugs on these young people for the long term.
And that they remain guinea pigs at the hands of the pharmaceutical companies to some degree. Thank you so much for joining us, co-director of For Women Scotland, Susan Smith there.
This will be a big challenge for the new First Minister,
We've got
John
a
Swinney.
right of reply. It really is. A Scottish Government spokesperson has said the CAS review is a comprehensive and valid scientific document in line with NHS England, for whom the report was commissioned. We are considering all of the recommendations.
Just embrace them. And coming up, Facebook and Instagram, the source for 1 in 50 crimes. It's a major point for scams. We're going to be speaking to someone to show you how to try to avoid getting scammed.
Here's Greg with the weather.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met Office. Over the next couple of days, high pressure is starting to build in across the UK. That's introducing something a bit more dry and settled than what we've been used to. So out there, first thing this morning, a bit of a dull start for a lot of us, but there is some sunshine along the south coast of England, parts of Northern Ireland and the far north of Scotland. The cloud will be thick enough in places to produce some spots of rain, and a few showers may well just develop further south, but for most it is a drier picture compared to Monday. And come the afternoon, hopeful a lot of the UK will see some bright spells. The cloud will be stubborn across parts of Scotland and northeast England, so feeling quite chilly here right throughout the day. Into the evening, clearing skies initially, but that will allow some mist and a low cloud to form. And then towards the very end of the night, just watching this next band of cloud and rain, it may well just start to approach the far northwest of Scotland. Under the cloud cover, temperatures not falling much lower than around 8 to 10 degrees. But where we do see some clear skies, bit of a chilly start on Wednesday, but here we will see some sunshine. Elsewhere, a bit of a dull start, but the mist and low cloud will begin to burn away. So come the afternoon, I'm fairly optimistic. A lot of us seeing some sunny spells. The exceptions really across the very far northwest of Scotland, maybe the far northwest of Northern Ireland too. Here we see some cloud and some rain, but in the sunshine, feeling pleasantly warm, highs potentially reaching 20 or 21 degrees.
That warm feeling inside from Box Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Hi, my name's Phil Cox, and I won the Great British Giveaway. I'd say, why not? What is it? The price of a text and £2 to enter. And if I can win it, anybody can win it. And they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News with Dubes & Co from 6, followed by Farage at 7. At 8, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg addresses the state of the nation. And at 9, join Patrick Christie's Tonight, followed by Headliners at 11. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
11 a.m. on Tuesday, the 7th of May, Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So a cyber crime warning. Facebook and Instagram are the source of 1 in 50 crimes. We'll tell you what signs to look out for next.
And defence under attack. China, of course it's China, suspected of hacking the Ministry of Defence, targeting military personnel. Don't we need to get tougher with them? This is what the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Mel Stride, told GB News earlier.
This is a third-party data set that appears to have been compromised. That has been shut down immediately by the Ministry of Defence.
Third-party data set. We'll explain what that means. Yeah. So the UK Eurovision entrant Ollie Alexander has said that the Union Jack flag can be divisive and nationalistic. Do you think?
And Manchester to number 10. That's how far the mother of Martin Hetty's walking in her campaign for tighter security at public venues after her son was murdered during the Manchester Arena terrorist attack. We're going to be talking to her as she starts that walk.
Get in touch with us this morning. gbnews.com/your say is the portal. We'll be reading your messages while Sophia Wensler reads you the news.
Bev, thank you. Good morning. It's 11:01. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Shadow Chancellor says Britain's economy is in a worse state than people may think. In a speech in London a short time ago, Rachel Reeves said the Conservative government isn't being honest with voters.
The Conservatives are gaslighting the British public. They say we've turned a corner and they ask people to stick with the Conservative Party. But it is those very Conservatives who are set to leave the average household £870 worse off through stealth taxes and increases in council tax. The Prime Minister claims that he is delivering for the country. But the British people did not order what this Prime Minister is delivering.
Talks will resume in Cairo today after Israel rejected a ceasefire proposal that was accepted by the Hamas terror group. Israel's Prime Minister says the terms of the agreement are far from meeting its core demands. But Benjamin Netanyahu said he would send a delegation to Egypt today to continue the ceasefire talks. It comes after a night of airstrikes with the Israeli military now in control of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. Former chairman of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Ellwood, told GB News that blocking the flow of aid would have devastating consequences.
The idea that Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I specifically named him because I don't believe many people in Israel are supportive of this, now wants to close down the Rafah crossing along with the Erez crossing in the north and then Karim Shalom as well. It means that more and more people will face famine. The humanitarian aid is not getting in. So this is compounding the matters. Charging into Rafah with those tanks is as bad as charging into Gaza in the first place. There's an absence of strategy as to where Prime Minister Netanyahu wants to go with this. And we saw things escalate very quickly with Iran, and that could easily happen again.
Now, China is suspected of carrying out a massive hacking attack on Britain's Ministry of Defence. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is updating MPs on the cyberattack today, in which an armed force database was targeted. It means bank details and some addresses of serving personnel and veterans may have been compromised. Cabinet Minister Mel Stride says the government took immediate action after discovering the breach.
This is a third-party data set that appears to have been compromised. That has been shut down immediately by the Ministry of Defence in terms of external access to it. It may be that Grant Shapps has more to say later on this, whether this is China or another state actor as well. So we do take this very seriously, but at the end of the day also, they are a very important economic partner, and we have global challenges like climate change that we need to engage with China in order to address.
In other news, the Russian president has claimed he could work with the West during a speech at his inauguration in Moscow. Vladimir Putin has been officially sworn in for another 6-year term at the Kremlin after elections that were widely seen as neither free nor fair. He made the comments despite the US and almost all EU nations avoiding the ceremony. It comes a day after Russia said it would hold nuclear weapons drills, which the US described as irresponsible rhetoric. A man who was arrested in Preston on Sunday has been charged with organising small boat crossings in the Channel. Iranian national Amanj Hassanzadeh, who's 34, is expected to appear before Preston magistrates later today. He was questioned by the National Crime Agency and charged with 2 counts of facilitating illegal immigration. It's in relation to 2 crossings made from France to the UK in November and December of last year. And things are getting musical in Malmö today as the 68th edition of the Eurovision gets underway. Britain's Ollie Alexander will be among those vying for the top prize, but he admits victory could be a long shot, with odds favouring Croatia, Switzerland and Ukraine. As many as 100,000 visitors are set to descend on the city in Sweden's southwest for the world's largest live music contest. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
Yeah, sorry. Time check is 11:06 with Britain's News on GB News, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So have you ever fallen for a scam on social media? Well, the latest research shows that Facebook and Instagram are the source of 1 in 50 crimes. It's not just fraud, it's also the breeding ground for the most serious of crimes.
Well, joining us now to talk about this is the campaigner and mother of Breck Bednar. You may remember the 14-year-old boy who was murdered after being groomed online in 2014 and is the founder of the Breck Foundation. Just so you can tell us, Lauren, good morning to you.
Good morning.
What does the Breck Foundation do?
Well, I set up the Breck Foundation on the back of my son's story because he was groomed online through friends while he was gaming with friends from school. And unfortunately, it was a predator there running the gaming group. And he was lured to his death. So I set up the charity because I wanted people to learn more about grooming, about abuse, about the sorts of dangers that children and adults can face online. And it doesn't seem to end. There's constantly new ways that people can harm other people.
I remember your story so clearly as a mum, and particularly as a mum of a teenage boy at the time, because I think there, but for the grace of God, go any of us, because we have to trust our kids, don't we, to some degree when we're online. But just tell people a little bit about what we can do, Lauren. What should we be looking out for with our teenagers?
Well, I think first and foremost is having that open conversation and knowing what they're engaging on with, which platforms they're using. I was actually aware that Breck was speaking with a stranger, and no matter how hard I tried to alert him, the police, school friends, other parents, people didn't believe it. So, you know, grooming, fraud, abuse, this can happen to anyone. You know, we all have vulnerabilities, and unfortunately, through these platforms that we all use so often, they find ways to get to us, either through algorithms or through enticing opportunities, enticing bargains. And I think, you know, looking at the story today, with Facebook and Meta, we have to remember, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And that was one of our early mottos with the Breck Foundation.
Are these wretched companies, Facebook, Meta, are they doing enough?
Absolutely not. I mean, we've been campaigning for ages to try to get these platforms to take more responsibility. You know, they take the profits, they, take all that money home, but they are not giving us that protection that we need, whether we're children, whether we're older people or people our age, because I know a lot of people our age that have fallen for scams on deals and specials on Facebook, TikTok, and they think they're getting a really great bargain, but it's fraud.
Why don't they do more? Lauren, because
they don't want to.
We saw, but the thing is, we saw during the pandemic, this is why I don't buy this idea they can't be nimble. Certain key words during the pandemic, as soon as a word came up, a post would be taken down.
Yep.
Why aren't they doing that to protect
I think that's what we really need to push. And, you know, with the Online Safety Act coming into play and with Ofcom needing to really, we need to support them, but also push them to force these platforms to take responsibility. They can use, you know, AI to find keywords that will ring that there's something wrong with the post, something wrong with what they're, you know, what they're posting.
You were aware your son, to take back to Brett, was talking to a stranger.
Yeah.
Did you feel powerless that you couldn't stop it?
I did feel powerless because with teenagers, back to what we said at the beginning, you know, they are just starting to get their independence, and they you know, they deserve to have some privacy. It's very hard to know how much, you know, to monitor them. I do fully believe when children are in primary school, they should not have smartphones. They should have no privacy whatsoever. But as they get older, you do need to, you know.
What age though, Lauren? It's a debate we have here a lot. But Bev takes a view, no smartphone before you're 16.
I think it's really difficult and depends on the maturity of the child. But in saying that, my son Breck was very mature in sort of his knowledge and, you know, ways that seemed to, you know, he's big brother of triplets after all, so he was helping me around the home with so many things. But he hadn't learned about the dangers because he just didn't recognize that sort of evil in the world, that people would do something like that.
And do you think the schools play a role as well? Because, of course, we all grew up with the idea of stranger danger.
Yeah, we did.
We were all warned, don't go in a car with someone you don't know. And it was a very simple message. It was very easy to understand. Yeah. And I wonder whether this generation haven't been given enough school education about this similar dangers.
The lines are so blurred because, you know, everyone online is a stranger, yet we make friends, we find relationships online. So I think we do need to keep pushing those messages that everyone online is a stranger. That doesn't mean they're all bad. It means we don't know who they are.
And it's young people at your son's age. And looking at this Facebook story, Instagram, source of 1 in 50 crimes, I imagine often that's going to be older people, but perhaps not. Perhaps other people, as you say, oh, this is a bargain.
Yes.
I'll have a bit of that.
It's going to be across the board. And unfortunately, it can cause a lot of distress and it can cause financial hardship. But I think all of this needs to be addressed with the platforms taking more responsibility. You know, that's the bottom line.
How's your campaign going? Do you sense you're getting anywhere with government? Because you need government on side, don't you?
We are getting somewhere. We have there's a group actually of bereaved families that are working together, and we work hard to try to make sure that the Online Safety Act is actually as powerful as it needs to be. And that's why we implore Ofcom, you know, we meet with them regularly to try to ensure that the platforms take the responsibility and not just the profits.
We're going to be talking in just a moment, actually. We're going to go to Sophie Reaper in Manchester. She's walking the length of the country with a mother who lost her son in the terrorist attacks at Ariana Grande concert. And I said, how as a mum, when you've been through this, how do you get out of bed in the morning and channel that energy into something positive?
Yeah, it's really hard. And sometimes people don't understand how hard it is, and other times people know that they couldn't do it themselves. So I think the most important thing for me is that people learn from Breck's story, that they learned, you know, through the Breck Foundation and other charities, how to keep safer online, whether it's abuse, grooming, harmful content that our children are being pushed, fraud, all of it. And it's a constant battle as parents to talk to our children about it. But also schools need to have the best online safety programs. It can't just be a boring lesson. It has to be used with real-life stories like Breck's and all the other children who have made or had mistakes or issues. And it needs to be engaging and interesting. And otherwise, they're just rules that they won't listen to.
OK.
How is it? Just very quickly, how are the other children doing?
The triplets are doing well. We all miss the brother. It's been 10 years, but we're bonding together.
Well, from one amazing woman to another amazing woman, thank you so much, Lauren, for coming in. We're going to go to Manchester now, where our North West of England reporter, Sophie Reaper. There you go, Sophie. Just remind people, where are you? What's happening?
Well, right now we're walking through Manchester. Joining me is Figan Murray, the mum of Martin Hett, who was one of the 22 who lost their lives in the Manchester Arena attack. Now, Figan, we started quite a big challenge with you here today. Do you want to tell our viewers what it is you'll be doing?
Yeah, I'll be walking 186 miles to Downing Street from the Manchester Arena, and we've just set off about 10 minutes ago.
So still quite a way to go. 186 miles this journey is that you'll be taking. Obviously, it's all to raise awareness of Martin's Law. Do you want to tell our viewers what it is and why it's so important?
Well, at the moment, there is absolutely no legislation anywhere in the world, not just the UK, about keeping people secure and safe at venues from terrorism. And of course, terrorism is something that will not go away. And modern terrorism means that it can happen, an attack can happen anytime, anywhere, any place, which makes it so dangerous. The walk is there to obviously go to number 10 to ask Rishi Sunak why the legislation hasn't happened yet, that we've been campaigning for 5 years. But it's also a campaign, a walk to raise public awareness about security. Because it's really important that we have this law in place so that when people go out and about to concerts or to a meal or to the theatre, etc., that they are actually kept safe. And at the moment, as I said, there is no law, and that needs to change.
Obviously, it might be a little bit loud for our viewers right now. We are, of course, walking through Manchester city centre, so as you would expect. Obviously, this is something that is incredibly important to you, and when we sat down, I know we had a chat yesterday ahead of this, I asked you what it was, why are you doing a walk? Why are you not doing something else to raise awareness around Martin's Law?
Well, we've been campaigning for 5 long years now, and I just feel that this was always my plan B, and I never thought for 1 minute I have to activate it. But here we are, 5 years on, and I've decided to do the walk to make sure that the Prime Minister gets the message and that this message is underlined, highlighted and put in bold.
Figen, you're an absolutely incredible woman. We at GB News wish you all the best of luck on this incredible challenge, and I'm sure we'll be touching base with you again. Good luck, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much. There you go, Figen Murray, walk to Downing Street, 186 long miles. Try and get this law over the line to try and make people more safe at venues in the UK.
Thank you, Sophie. Thank you so much.
Good luck to her. What a great mum she is, fighting for the memory of her son. Just two of them.
Yeah.
Remarkable women. As you say, how would you get out of bed if you'd gone through what either of those women have been through? Mums.
Amazing.
And those triplets lost their big brother.
Awful. Right, let us know your thoughts this morning, won't you? gbnews.com/your say. But still to come this morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin has renewed his oath for a 5th term with Russia under firm control. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Rishi Sunak has come out fighting and declared war on what he's called the UK's sick note culture. The country's welfare state bill costs the average taxpayer now £2,000 every single year for every British taxpayer. Astonishing numbers, Catherine, simply mind-bending. 69 billion quid every year now goes on benefits. I paid my tax bill last month. Where did your tax go? I clicked on it. Long-term sickness and benefits is now second only to the NHS on what we spend our tax pound on. This is simply unsustainable.
That's exactly what the Prime Minister said. 69 billion a year on long-term sick and disability benefits, projected to rise to 90 billion by the end of the next Parliament if nothing has done. As he said, it is totally, totally unsustainable. And the message from Rishi Sunak really is, tough love, you're going to take your medicine, it's going to be good for you, you may not like it. Let's have a look at what he had to say earlier.
Everyone with the potential should be supported, and not just to earn, but to contribute and belong. And we must never tolerate barriers that hold people back from making their contribution and from sharing in that sense of self-worth that comes from feeling part of being something bigger than ourselves. And that is why this is a moral mission, and why the value of work is so central to my vision for welfare reform.
Certainly, Rishi Sunak said in the speech, in the period since the pandemic, something has gone wrong. Of course, millions of people had their wages paid by furlough. Now, that was an entirely artificial situation in an exceptional circumstance, but quite a lot of people left the workplace and simply haven't come back.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 11:20.
That was Nigel Nelson.
This is Britain's news.
Being disruptive.
Right,
Can't wait to talk.
you know who we are and you know who these two are, so let's just move on, shall we? Can we just give a moment to an amazing woman? It's been a show of amazing women today, hasn't it? Chris Halenga, she was the figurehead of a breast cancer charity called Copperfield, and she passed away yesterday. She had actual stage 4 cancer for 15 years, Colville, and there she's very distinct.
God love her.
She's an identical twin, actually. I met her, I was looking to meet her a few times at various events, and she was always such a sunny disposition, so inspiring, and people use that word way too frequently, but she always wore something sparkly, Nigel, and had great earrings and dress sense, and she just lived this vivacious, dynamic life and did a really good job with Copperfield as a charity.
Yeah, well, it worked. I mean, the whole thing was that she took the issue head on, hence the title. And the other bit, I think, that she's only 23 when she was first diagnosed, and given that was back in 2009 and she's only just died, it gave her a long time to campaign. But obviously, she is a great loss to that kind of campaign.
And of course, she was her doctor turned her away for a year, Colville.
Yes.
And she knew there was a problem. Doctor turned her away, and her point was, you might have to sort it out yourself, women.
Yes, I think she wanted to change the dynamic around, not saying that you're going to die because you have this, which was the point, but she wanted to live with the cancer, I think in her words, because she was only given 2 years when she was diagnosed. So 15 years she battled. Not to say she was battling the disease, she was battling to change the way people perceive and help others. Obviously, she's done an amazing job with Copperfield in terms of raising the awareness level for younger women to be aware of it, because as we say, 23 when she was diagnosed, and that issue that it can be sometimes the language used around it, the target audience, maybe it's for older women, and I'm sure thousands of women have probably engaged and checked themselves because of what she did, and probably survive now because of the efforts, and hopefully Copperfield will continue with the great work that she's
Nigel, she didn't realise that you could check yourself, and she didn't think at the age of 23 you could possibly get breast cancer.
That's the point. I mean, because it is rare.
Yeah.
And the idea that she discovered that she had it and then told other women to basically take control of themselves, that don't always trust the medical profession. If you feel there's something wrong, make sure you go and do something about it.
Do you feel a lump?
Yeah.
That's what she's saying effectively.
Yeah.
Really important message, Bev, isn't it?
It is, and she was part of a documentary, actually, in 2014 called Chris, A Dying to Live, and she did a BBC documentary. That was the BBC documentary. She wrote a book as well, a best-selling memoir. In 2021, she won a Pride of Britain Award. She was just brilliant.
But as you were saying, Bev, I think she was creative and fun with a very serious, very tragic issue that, it can easily take people down. Yes,
teenagers would listen to.
Exactly. She wanted it to be engaging, and it's a different way. We can all say this, but when you're living with this, with the issue of cancer, we probably all know people nowadays, unfortunately, who go through it, and it's hard to be positive. It's hard to bring fun. It's hard to be creative. She took that on in a wonderful way.
Really remarkable.
Her twin sister is going to carry on running the charity, which is really important.
Well, let's hope it does continue.
Yeah, she was an absolute joy every time I met her, so, very sad news. Right, change of gear now.
I'll be watching. Well, actually, I put it on just for the results, actually.
Oh, no.
I can't bear
to watch the show.
I want to watch the UK, see how bad we are.
Yeah.
And to see how bad the Greek song is, because it's always terrible, let's be honest.
Well, not always, but anyway, go on, yeah.
But so the stupid contestant we've got, what's his name? Ollie
Alexander. Ollie Alexander.
He's decided that the Union flag is nationalistic and divisive.
Yeah, I was saying to Nigel earlier, I think he should have read the fine print on terms of what Eurovision is about, because if there's not something that's more nationalistic than the Eurovision Song Contest, that is all about flag waving for your country of choice.
Yeah.
And we'll watch it because it's entertaining and we get
because we're so bad at it.
My wife and I tend to block out this Saturday. Unfortunately, we've got a birthday this weekend, so we'll probably have to record it and watch it.
Yeah.
But it is about... I struggle with what Ollie Alexander is saying, that he's representing the United Kingdom, but he doesn't quite... He's a bit ambivalent around the flag.
A bit ambivalent?
That's what he said.
It's a lot
I'm ambivalent about the Union Jack flag.
It's divisive. How is it divisive?
Well, if this is an event that brings us all
together in there.
Yes.
That's the whole point of the flag,
I think
isn't
that
it?
actually that he is ambivalent. What he's ambivalent about is his own feelings anyway, about what it means. But he also says, look, I'll be carrying the flag proudly at the opening ceremony. I'll be thinking about all the great things about Britain and the benefits that he's got from it. So he's not saying that he's actually against the flag. It always feels like he's been caught out somewhere with an interviewer who said, what do you think about it? He's got ambivalent.
We're getting form for this, because last year's entrant, whose name I've long forgotten, a woman, said in 2020, I hate Britain. Brilliant. Yeah. So that's a terrific ambassador for Britain in the Eurovision.
Yeah, I think that should disqualify you.
Yeah, and she came 26th out of 27. I was just sorry she wasn't last.
Do you think she got what she deserved?
I do. Absolutely.
What's about the quality of the music of the song?
Who cares? Actually, it was a hopeless song, not what little I can remember of it.
Par for the course for our normal entries. Well, the year before that, where Sam, I've forgotten his surname, we did a...
Sam Ryder.
Sam Ryder did a fantastic song. Yeah, great ambassador for the country.
He won in the arena, but the boat around the world, or around Europe, Ukraine was always...
Including Australia.
Yeah, how are they in the Eurovision?
And Ukraine was bound to win that one. Had it not been for Ukraine that year, we would have won.
Yes, we would.
That would definitely be a bit of...
And he did have an amazing voice. We'll still have.
It was fantastic. But it was also a great song.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about... I mean, it was the first time I've actually sat through an entire Eurovision because I wanted to see him, knowing that Ukraine would win. I wanted to see him. I should be watching again on Saturday. I watched it last year.
So you'll be watching too?
I'm hooked now. Yeah, after that one.
Yeah. Well, I think as ever, she and I aren't agreeing on anything. She won't be watching it under any circumstances.
I can't think of anything worse than spending my Saturday night
it's
watching
totally voyeurism
it
of watching these acts that come and say, which is going to be the crazy rock act, which is going to be the crazy one with something, the choreography is going to be bonkers.
Yeah.
What is our entry going to do? It's all these other subplots that there are in Eurovision that we all really...
And of course, it's the 50th anniversary, let's not forget, most important thing in Eurovision history, of ABBA winning Waterloo in Brighton Dome in 1974. Sweden won last year. Funny that. So Eurovision can be held in Sweden this year.
Yes.
Funny that. And here's a great question. Do you know how many marks we gave Waterloo, ABBA, in 1974 as a country, the United Kingdom? Bearing in mind they won.
I just about wasn't around then.
No.
But I'd say 0 points.
I don't know. I can't remember. But I remember it happening and thinking, this band is really special.
Yeah, I was blown away. I was 13 watching.
Yeah,
we did. We gave them 0 points. Isn't that amazing?
We can always spot a winner in Eurovision.
And our entry that year was Olivia Newton-John, Australian. How does that work?
Yeah, well, because Australia is in Eurovision.
Now in the Eurovision.
But I've always been curious about how these different countries get in.
Long Live Love. How boring is that?
Should we just do another...
so unmoved by all of this.
I really am. I have nothing.
We've lost the room here.
I have nothing. Can we do another gear change and talk about the fact that Putin has been signed in again in Russia? Kulve, good or bad news?
Well, look, we can all see the direction that Russia's been heading in under his leadership. It's a totalitarian state. He's got full control of the politics and the country. Any opposition tends to get silenced in various ways. It can't be good for global politics. We have to see how it plays out, but it's one for the Russian people. That's the thing that we do have to be respectful of, that it's up to the Russian people how they respond and react to to what's happening in Russian politics.
Yeah, up to a point.
But how do they overthrow him? They'll get shot.
That's the problem. I think it's up to a point. But bear in mind, Putin's been around now. He's been president for 20 years, prime minister for another 4 years.
It's 24 years, actually.
Yeah.
He got in 2000.
Yeah, but and then was PM.
Yeah, that's true.
4 years as PM.
That's right. That's right.
He's been there longer than Joseph Stalin was.
Yeah.
And the point is, what he believes in is not the Gorbachev kind of perestroika. What he believes in is a greater Russia. He wants the Russian Empire back again, and that's where it affects us. And that's what's going on in Ukraine. The danger about all that is if he chooses to move further into NATO countries, then we are at risk of a world war.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of this, if Trump wins the election, Colville, he's indicated he will be very lukewarm about giving any money whatsoever to Ukraine, and we know a big $60 billion package is going through.
Yes.
That won't last very long.
I think the challenge if Donald Trump wins is his views can change quite quickly.
Yes.
So I wouldn't take for granted anything that Donald Trump currently is saying to if he's prime minister and he gets advised about what Russia's agenda is, what Putin is doing, and there'll be, he would have two strong men, inverted commas, sort of face off. That's a difficult thing for the rest of the world as well, because it's high risk, as Nigel says. We don't want to have more confrontation with Russia. But if Putin's agenda is more aggressive, if the war in Ukraine continues, if it encourages him to do further things, then we need US support for NATO to ensure that we could respond and react. But we don't want to get there. I think the real focus here has to be on winning the war in Ukraine.
People keep saying, why doesn't the SAS take him out? That would be a disastrous thing to do.
No, it would be.
It really would.
Where Calvary is right is that he is a matter for the Russian people.
Yeah.
What he does is a matter for all of us.
Yes, but for us to take him out would be a...
No, we shouldn't be doing that, no.
Yeah.
Right, Colville and Nigel, thank you so much for this morning. Sophia Wensler's waiting very patiently for us with your news.
Bev, thank you. It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. The Shadow Chancellor says Britain's economy is in a worse state than many people think. In a speech in London a short time ago, Rachel Reeves said the Conservative government isn't being honest with voters.
The Conservatives are gaslighting the British public. They say we've turned a corner, and they ask people to stick with the Conservative Party. But it is those very Conservatives who are set to leave the average household £870 worse off through stealth taxes and increases in council tax. The Prime Minister claims that he is delivering for the country. But the British people did not order what this Prime Minister is delivering.
China is suspected of carrying out a massive hacking attack on Britain's Ministry of Defence. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is updating MPs on the cyber-attack today, in which an armed force database was targeted. It means bank details and some addresses of serving personnel and veterans may have been compromised. Talks will resume in Cairo today after Israel rejected a ceasefire proposal that was accepted by the Hamas terror group. Israel's Prime Minister says the terms of the agreement are far from meeting its core demands. But Benjamin Netanyahu said he would send a delegation to Egypt today to continue the ceasefire talks. It comes after a night of airstrikes, with the Israeli military now in control of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2533 and €1.1644 euros. The price of gold is £1,846 and 40 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,300 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon, good afternoon, Britain, with Emily and Tom this morning. What have you got on the show today, guys?
Well, this morning, the Prime Minister has met with his cabinet for the first time since those disastrous local election results.
All to play for, Tom, how dare you?
Oh, that's what he's saying.
Yes,
well,
all to play for.
We'll be hearing from the Prime Minister around 1 o'clock with his latest sort of words on what has gone on, and it'll be interesting to see if his line has shifted at all.
I'm so sorry about Andy Street losing, particularly. Yeah. I thought he was a great mayor for West Midlands.
See, he's gone hiking.
Has he?
Yeah. Going off into, I think, the Welsh mountains. Just.
I wish he can't go
take him with him. Yes, exactly.
Have you noticed some of these new Labour mayors who've been elected immediately tweeting about what's going on in Gaza?
Of course.
But not so much about the local issues.
Yeah,
but, there you go.
And all these stupid councils who are banging on about Gaza, what can they do about it then? Can they just sort out the potholes?
If they change the way potholes are dealt with and bin collections, surely Netanyahu will see sense.
Exactly.
Well, it might help, actually.
I know.
Yes, a little bit of...
And that revolting Green councillor who the Green Party are investigating when they were told way before the local elections what he was like.
Isn't it interesting how all of these campaign groups, for example, Hope Not Hate, they look into lots of the alleged extremists of parties that are on the centre-right.
Yeah, the Tories.
They never look into any candidates from left-wing parties, not one.
No. Yeah, I did actually have a little look about Hope Not Hate. Do they ever shine a light on some of the extremists on the other side of politics or Islamists or whatever? Absolutely
Where is
not.
Caroline
They do not.
Lucas, the Green Party MP on this?
Give us one more thing from your show, guys. What else?
Well, it's interesting.
European Union.
You know...
Eurovision song?
You know how these evil, nasty Tories have signed a third country migration and economic development deal with Rwanda? Well, it turns out someone else is looking to do the same. None other than Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, is looking to sign deals with Tunisia and Egypt for economic development and migration partnerships. A third country migration deal in the vein of Rwanda.
What will the French president say? He said that was against our European values, so there's a bit of fisticuffs perhaps at the heart of the European Union.
Tom, Emily, thank you so much. They will be with you in about 25 minutes. We have got a lot more to come, though. Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Offline and overlooked. That's what Age UK say millions of British pensioners are. Why? Because they cannot or won't access the internet. It's leading to digital exclusion. So the charities campaigning for public services like banks, utilities and even the NHS to maintain a more human approach.
Everything's online. People assume you've got a smartphone with a mobile number and an email, and without that you don't exist in this world anymore. We've got to try and get the government to see that it's so important to make people feel that they belong, because there's a feeling that the older generation just feel that they're forgotten, they're in the way, and we already know that anyway, but it's just another reason for them to feel that they're not wanted. They'll just accept it and they'll say, well, that's it, I can't do it anymore. And that's it, whereas other people would be really kicking and screaming. So we need to be the voice for older people.
Despite digital technology playing an increasing role in our lives, around 1 in 5 over 65s in the UK don't use the internet. Thornycroft Centre in Pontefract, West Yorkshire provides a space for this age group to socialise and get help to go online.
I'm not that good with mobiles, so when you mention anything about online, I ain't a clue what you're talking about.
The closure of thousands of banks is also detrimental to the older generation.
A lot of our members what come, they tend to use cash.
They don't like to use bank cards. I think a lot of it's trust or the lack of knowledge. They don't understand how it works. I think they're very vulnerable as well with online. It's really important that they're aware how to use it and how to use it safely.
So, in an online era, it's still crucial for many to have an offline option.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on.
GB News, Britain's news channel. I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Time is 11:39. This is Britain's News on GB News. Andrew Pierce and Beth Turner.
So this morning, Labour has accused the government of gaslighting the public over the state of the economy. Our business and economics editor, Liam Halligan, was at the Shadow Chancellor's speech and joins us now. Good morning, Liam. Good morning. Great to see you.
Morning,
I thought she was quite feisty this morning, Rachel Reeves. She came out swinging a little bit, I thought. But did she say anything that you think will convince people that Labour are the solution to all of our economic problems?
Well, indeed, Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves came to the City of London. I'm deep within the square mile still to give a speech this morning. There was very little economics in it, actually, certainly no policy announcements. It was basically pure politics, Bev. We know that this coming Friday, the GDP numbers, the growth numbers for the UK are going to come out, and they're probably going to show that Britain has escaped recession. So after the economy shrank during the back end of last year, the economy is actually now growing again. Labour know also that the next inflation number, when it comes out later this month, is likely to be much, much nearer the Bank of England's 2% target than the current 3.2% rate of inflation. So what the Shadow Chancellor was trying to do with this phrase gaslighting, which many GB News viewers and listeners won't even know what it means. I know my mum doesn't know what it means, for instance. What it means basically is trying to convince somebody that something is true when it's not true. And Labour's line is that even though the economy is getting better, there is no feel-good factor, whatever the Tories say. And anyone who says the economy is actually improving for ordinary working men and women, the Shadow Chancellor's phrase, is out of touch, is patronising, doesn't really understand how the rest of us live. So this was about political positioning rather than economic policy this morning.
OK. Thank you, Liam. Thank you very much for joining us. Still to come this morning, we're going to be speaking to the campaigner who's taking Rishi Sunak to task over these beautiful birds, swifts, of course. And we had this lady on, Hannah Bourne-Taylor. We had her on a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. Was it last week? I'm losing track of time. And she's trying to persuade the government to put swift bricks in all new build houses so that when the swifts return, which they do this week, they've got somewhere to live because their population has halved in the UK. We're going to be talking to her in just a moment. Let's have a look what you've been saying at home.
Alistair says if any political party is gaslighting the UK economy, it's Labour. They talk down the UK for political purposes. But all oppositions do that, Alistair, I'm afraid.
Yeah. No matter how long Rachel Reeves talked, says John, do they have a real plan when they have not seen the books? How can they know what they can promise us? It's a relatively good point. David was saying, why didn't we show the full Rachel Reeves speech?
Because we didn't want people to fall asleep. Because it went on for about half an hour, and I think that's a long time. It's on the internet if you want to catch up with it, and there'll be a big report in the papers, but I think half an hour of a Rachel Reeves speech.
Sorry, David, I'm not sure that was the answer you were looking for, but you know we'll always be completely honest with you. Right, more of your comments, keep them coming in, gbnews.com/your say, and as I say, we're going to be talking to Hannah Bourne-Taylor about this campaign to give swifts a home. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There may be a bit of fog around tonight, but through today it's looking largely dry. That's because we have high pressure building towards the southwest of us, and this high pressure is going to continue to build as we go through this week. That being said, there will be a few showers around today, especially across parts of England and Wales. Some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. Most places, though, avoiding these. Across parts of Scotland, some thicker cloud bringing some outbreaks of rain here. But like I said, many areas staying dry, and there'll be some sunny breaks developing in the sunshine, feeling pretty warm. Highs in the low 20s towards the south, a little bit cooler than this further north. A few more showery outbreaks perhaps as we go through this evening, but most of these easing overnight, so it does look like it's going to be a largely dry night, and we will see some skies clearing, but it's not going to turn particularly chilly. However, we do need to allow for some mist and fog patches to develop, both around coastal areas and perhaps inland spots where we see the clear skies developing too. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, so a relatively mild start for most of us on Wednesday morning. Otherwise, as we go through the day itself and towards the northwest of the UK, a bit more cloud here and some outbreaks of rain pushing into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, a largely dry day and a good deal of sunshine developing through the cloud, in which it should feel a little bit warmer than today. Temperatures similar, perhaps a touch higher for some of us. See you again soon.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Now, do you know what a Swiftie is?
I do.
What is it?
It's somebody who likes Taylor Swift's music, which, of course, you know I know nothing about.
That's
because
right.
I don't know any of her songs, but, of course, Rishi Sunak went to one of her concerts last
That's
summer.
right. Well, I now have a new definition of a Swiftie, because it is somebody that wants to look after these beautiful birds. We're looking at the pictures here.
Oh, they
Hannah
are
Bourne-Taylor
very pretty.
Is here, and she is taking on the Prime Minister. Here's a picture of her covered in body paint to make her point. She was campaigning for Swift bricks to be compulsory in new housing developments, and I'm delighted to say that Hannah is in the studio with us now with a Swift brick.
With a Swift brick.
Explain this to us, Hannah.
Tiny little hole for a bird.
Is. I know, they just need that little hole, and this will be the only ground they will ever intentionally touch in their whole lifetimes, which can be 20 years. How extraordinary.
What?
Yep, and they're site loyal, so...
They never touch the ground,
They never touch the ground unless they're in their nesting site, which normally is a nook or cranny, but with Swift bricks it would be one of these. And even better than that, let's say Mr and Mrs Swift do move into this one, and it's in, you know, Mr Michael Gove's house, for example. Right. Mr and Mrs Swift will stay in this house, their home for life. So for 20 years, they'll cross the Sahara Desert twice every year and come back to the exact site, which also means that if you block them inadvertently, they then fatally break their wings trying to get back home.
No.
Yeah.
So they don't build a nest like other birds?
No, they've adapted. They used to live in the holes of our tall primal forest trees. But from the 17th century onwards, of course, we felled those trees, and so they adapted into the equivalents, which are nooks and crannies in our buildings.
Where do they originate from? What country would they have started their lives?
Well, these are British citizens
Right.
because they breed here. That's how
Right.
it's defined. So they are born in the walls of our houses, and then they fly for 9 months of the year, going to the Congo basins, the rainforests in Africa, and then they fly all the way back and come home. They come home to us.
And how many are there?
Well, unfortunately, the rapid plummeting population has lost 62% of their breeding population. So there's probably an estimated about 45,000 pairs right now, scheduled to drop again to fewer than 40,000 pairs by next year.
Oh, no.
When do they land back in this country?
Today!
Today?
What the average return date is today?
Will be today. So it's today and this week. And they are that organised that they all will return on roughly the same day?
It's quite astonishing, the records of people who have been studying them. They are often to the day, because, of course, we know that they are the individual birds that are coming back to the exact sites. We know that those individual birds can come back, so we know their dates, we can log them.
And do they fly as a flock?
No, they don't. They are colony nesting, but they do meet up, I think, in the air, but they instinctively go on their own, and they reunite as pairs.
So there will be people watching this, Hannah, who will say, I want these birds to return to my house. I want to give them a home, because our viewers are compassionate and kind people. Can you retrospectively fit a brick like this?
Yes, you can, and you can also put external wooden nest boxes onto your house, which might be easier. And if you want to know, you can online search, you can contact me. The RSBP has advice too. There are so many different manufacturers that it is good to do, but the government could do it better.
Do you need to attract them? Does there have to be grass or something in there to draw them?
No, nothing needs to be in there. That you can place swift calls, because, of course, they're not going to necessarily know that there's a hole there. So the original finding of the hole is quite hard. It's a challenge. So, yeah, there are lots of things that you can do to promote the fact that, hey, guys, we've got a home for you. Do you want to come and live with us?
And that information is all available online?
Online, and if in doubt, contact me. I have hundreds and hundreds of people. In fact, last time I was on your show, probably about 60 people contacted me.
Great.
Bring it on. I live and sleep and work this.
And you're on Twitter, or X, as we call it now?
Yeah, and my website has all my details. You can contact me through that, and I will reply.
And I'm intrigued, when they're in the Congo, when they fly, do they land on the ground there?
No, they stay airborne. They sleep, they eat, they mate on the wing.
And they find what do they live in when they're in the Congo?
They live in the sky.
Just spend the whole time flying?
Yes, but they're going to the Congo basin because of the rainforests. So
right.
They're insect-eating birds, so that's where they go for
What is their lifespan?
That's what's so amazing. So average garden birds, robin, blackbirds, about 3 years. These guys, crossing the Sahara twice every year, 20 years.
No.
They live for
They can
20
live up
years.
to 20 years. In fact, the oldest is 22.
And Hannah, you're furious with Michael Gove, aren't you? Because am I right in saying that when he was housing minister, he'd sort of promised to get involved and then went quiet?
So he is the Secretary of State for the Department of Levelling Up. So the buck stops with him, and he is in charge of our shelter. But these guys nest in our shelter, so by default, he's also in charge of Swift Shelter. And he could greenlight a proposal that has been approved by a coalition of experts recommended by Natural England. It is right there. He could just say yes. Apparently, our Prime Minister is blocking this proposal. That is not official. We don't know for sure, but I think my source is pretty accurate. So it's either Michael Gove or Rishi Sunak, but those two people could just greenlight the
So, Hannah, is this because
bird.
house builders don't want the additional cost?
No, I don't think cost has anything to do with it, especially when this is very little cost.
Sure.
But the government meeting I last had in February with Zach Goldsmith, former Housing Minister Kit Malthouse, and the Minister of Housing at the time, was also with the house builders, and they raised no objections.
Right.
So there is no barrier. So I don't know what these two men are doing, but they're playing with the existence of a 60-million-year-old bird. What are they doing?
And it would be such an easy win, this, wouldn't it?
Yes, my God, what a vote winner.
Your ESG, your environmental social governance box.
They should
tick
put
the box.
a brick in Downing Street.
They should and they could, and I would do it. This has got Michael Gove's name all over it. It's been earmarked for him. Or, hey, Rishi Sunak, I'll get you one too. The point is that this campaign, unlike a lot of campaigns, unites everyone. No one doesn't want this.
It's a lovely campaign.
And it's such a simple thing. There's no chain of complication, cost or anything like that. This is a win-win. This has been described by politicians across parties as an absolute no-brainer. It's also absolutely and urgently essential, because without swift bricks, there's no nesting habitat for these birds, and there never will be.
Do you have one? Do you have any nesting with you, Hannah?
I have some that I've managed to safeguard because the that not in my house, but in my village, I go around and make sure that when people are pointing and repairing their walls and their roofs, I say, excuse me, please, can you keep that whole, or please, can I give you a Swift brick? So that's OK, but I can't do that for every single pair.
Are they using environmental issues, as in climate change issues, as an excuse for this? Because obviously, insulation of new houses is important to make them airtight so that you don't lose heat. Are they concerned that this is losing heat?
Perfect point. Firstly, it doesn't conflict. Secondly, it does, in terms of this is why Swift bricks are so absolutely essential, because climate mitigation measures in new builds mean that there will never be opportunities for nesting habitat. Plus, the insulation run and pushed by the government that has a budget from going from 1 billion to over 6 billion by 2030 is external wall insulation, soffits, aka Swift's enemy number one. So because of climate change and climate mitigation measures, both for existing houses and new builds, this is why this measure is so essential.
Yeah.
Do you think people realise sometimes if they've got a Swift brick in their house what's going on? Do you think they understand?
No. I think that's part of the problem. People aren't deliberately blocking their nesting sites out. And actually, this campaign has won Campaign of the Year. It had the fastest growing petition because people genuinely love these birds. They're dubbed our icons of summer. People all around the country have welcome home flags at this time of year.
I hate to interrupt you, Hannah, but that was so fascinating. We've got to read the Department for Levelling Up statement. They said, we are working hard with the sector to promote the provision of nesting bricks for our Swift population, and we welcome any action by developers to provide nesting facilities for birds. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you to you at home for watching. Here are Emily and Tom with Good Afternoon Britain.
See you tomorrow.
Is the EU copying Britain's Rwanda scheme? Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission President, seems to suggest they might.
And should Ollie Alexander represent Britain at Eurovision? He said some controversial things about our own nation's flag. So there you go. Should he be representing us on the international stage at such an illustrious event, Tom? At such an illustrious event. Stay with us after the weather.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, very good day to you. Here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. There may be a bit of fog around tonight, but through today it's looking largely dry. That's because we have high pressure building towards the southwest of us, and this high pressure is going to continue to build as we go through this week. That being said, there will be a few showers around today, especially across parts of England and Wales. Some of them could be a little bit on the heavy side. Most places, though, avoiding these. Across parts of Scotland, some thicker cloud bringing some outbreaks of rain here, but like I said, many areas staying dry, and there'll be some sunny breaks developing in the sunshine, feeling pretty warm, highs in the low 20s towards the south, a little bit cooler than this further north. A few more showery outbreaks perhaps as we go through this evening, but most of these easing overnight, so it does look like it's going to be a largely dry night, and we will see some skies clearing, but it's not going to turn particularly chilly. However, we do need to allow for some mist and fog patches to develop, both around coastal areas and perhaps inland spots where we see the clear skies developing too. Temperatures not dropping a huge amount, so a relatively mild start for most of us on Wednesday morning. Otherwise, as we go through the day itself and towards the northwest of the UK, a bit more cloud here and some outbreaks of rain pushing into far northwestern parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Elsewhere, a largely dry day and a good deal of sunshine developing through the cloud, in which it should feel a little bit warmer than today. Temperatures similar, perhaps a touch higher for some of us. See you again soon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's the